Yeah, I got it. A little louder voice.
Hello. I remember we're going to start. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you coming out tonight for our committee meeting. We're going to start with public comment. Just so you know, we did this, it has been done in the past, but any type of comment that you have with anything that's on our agenda, that's all of the agenda. That's including the personnel, the policy, the curriculum. We're going to do that first, because we have any comment first, and then the second comment will be anything after. So the first one will be anything on any three of those agendas. So public comment. According to policy number 903, public comment, which is limited to 30 minutes, should be directed to the presiding officer rather than individual board members, district employees, or members of the public. For confidentiality and privacy rights, specific comments regarding particular individuals must be communicated privately to the school board and superintendent via email at psdschoolboard@penridge.org.
There's two.
I thought we were doing personnel. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, it was in public. Okay, sorry.
Right.
Sorry.
You're right.
Okay, so the first one's Laura Foster from East Rock Hill.
Hey. Laura Foster, East Rock Hill. We're talking about the featuring PSD's policy update plan. I'm very thankful to the new composition of the board. It is my hope that the board will work to change the climate of racism, homophobia, and transphobia in the schools. To any students listening tonight, know that you will likely once again hear homophobic and transphobic rhetoric here tonight. Know that you are on the right side of history, and that the vitriol spilled by the homophobes in our community is their cross to bear, not yours. It's important that we recognize what life has been like for our queer and trans kids over the past several years. There's been too many years of heartbreak in the school that have gone overlooked, dismissed, and ignored by the previous board and administration. There have been too many kids scared to be themselves for fear of retribution, fear of bullying, discrimination, and even fear for their lives. All this while the old board openly mocked who these children are as transgender and instituted policy after policy discriminating against queer kids, against trans kids, and non-binary kids. This was all done knowing that it was illegal. This was done knowing that forcing children to out themselves to use the bathroom is a safety risk for these students. This was done knowing that their actions directly increase the risk of suicide for these students. Every single member of this board has been given the Education Law Center statement on the impact of these clearly discriminatory policies and guidelines. Please don't ignore them like the last board did. Myself and other community advocates have had the good fortune to be able to listen to the stories of some of the queer students in our school. What I've heard over the past year is horrifying. Story after story, discrimination, attacks, death threats, story after story of queer kids being harassed, of trash being thrown on their heads in the bathrooms, of not drinking water all day for fear of being outed to urinate, of being jumped on, of being followed in the halls, of being called faggot, of being told they should kill themselves, or being told that they should be killed. Let's just sit with this for a moment. Imagine what it feels like to hear your child come home from school and tell you that someone said they would shoot them simply for walking into a classroom where the GSA kids meet. Imagine that you're a guidance counselor hearing this story, the caring and empathy that you have for this child, but your hands are tied because of the bogus Dr. Durr guidelines that leave you fearful for your job if you're offering support for a kid that is gay. Imagine that your child meets with a superintendent to address the hostile environment that they endure every day, and he tells them that being queer is the same as having a mental health issue. Do you think these kids feel safe telling anyone in administration when this happens? The answer is a resounding no. But now there is hope. Now there is hope that the past wrongdoings will be acknowledged and rectified. Now there is hope that these stories of discrimination and harassment and death threats will be taken seriously. That our board will always look to see if a policy increases suicide for just one student in the district, that it is enough to say that this policy is not for Penridge. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Laura. Next is Janelle Montigny from Hilltown.
I'm going to be reading something on behalf of a Penridge student, my friend's daughter, Janelle Montigny Hilltown. I'm a 17-year-old junior at the high school. I'm concerned about potential risks that the policy in which students who identify as trans may use the bathroom of their preferred sex, despite their biological sex. In early October last year, I was grabbed by my biological woman parts on my chest and pushed into a wall by a biological male. For confidentiality reasons, he'll be referred to as Person A. Person A was a recurring individual seen in bathrooms all over the school, skipping class, vaping, doing things that are not appropriate in the first place. Many girls felt uncomfortable with this. It was commonly talked about topic, and comments such as, "Are you kidding me? I'm using a bathroom and I hear Person A voice starting screaming," or "That scared me. I wasn't expecting to hear that kind of voice," or "Why is he in here in the first place?" As things started to escalate, I voiced my opinion to my friends. Even other guys in the school felt empathy for the girls. They found it weird and uncomfortable. Let me add that when a friend went to her grade level principal about her concerns, she was told to use the commonly referred to trans single user bathrooms. Continuing my personal situation, Person A made a threat to me posted to a story on Snapchat. I then started getting countless texts and messages informing me and also warning me about the bathrooms in school and that I should probably watch my back. Walking to school a morning or two after is when he pushed me. I did not want to make a big deal because I could hold my own, so I did not go to the principal right away. Not until I was fuming about how not only did I get pushed, but by a boy who thinks he can hit a girl, which any properly raised child should know is wrong, and on top of that, I was grabbed inappropriately. My teacher then had the obligation to report it. I told the truth, but still did not want to start anything more. I tried to get him, Person A, in as little trouble as possible. I wanted him to be put in his place and to think about how wrong this was. While he did get suspended, and I am thankful for this, he continued threatening me, my family, and my address on social media. A few days later, he posted again that his new name would be a feminine name. When he returned back to school from his suspension, I felt angry, while my parents felt scared that I would see him in the bathroom where there were no cameras nor supervision fast enough to stop something from happening. Despite me being able to hold my own, and Person A changing his name to a feminine one, his physical appearance and structure did not change. Facing the facts, he was and still is bigger than me, and pains me to say stronger. Sure enough, I walk into the bathroom closest to my class, which is what we were told to do, and he was there. I walk in, and he immediately rolls his eyes and starts running his mouth. I yell at him to get out, and this is not where he belongs. I report it to find out that he was skipping class in that bathroom 2 different floors away from where he was supposed to be. I later find out that he knew where my class was because he said something to one of my peers, who relayed the information on to me. My friends continued to see him and hear him in the bathrooms running his mouth about me and people related to me. Finally, one day, I was in the main bathroom near the office, again, closest to my math class, and this is the final encounter that really made me want to voice my opinion. I walk in, and before I turn the corner, I can hear him saying things about me to his friends. This was my last straw. I yelled for him to get out again, and that this is not right, and he came after me screaming and harassing me to the point where a teacher came in and dragged him out, thankfully, before he made his final approach to me. Well, after this, he was informed to not be in the bathroom where I am anymore. This does not take away from other trans people in there. While many may say one situation cannot take away from the opportunity from others, the common theme of the majority still is the fact that no matter what, there will still be feelings of uncomfortableness in a vulnerable place. While yes, trans students should also have the opportunity to feel comfortable, that is what already designated individual bathrooms are for. Before I get too deep off track of all the other possibilities and situations that can occur, I want to again share this policy gets close to home, and I can fully say that by changing it, the harassment won't stop and will only escalate. The best way to ensure safety to all students is to make the gender-neutral policy apply only to single-user bathrooms. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Janelle, for that. So just to let you guys know, just to remind you, it is 3 minutes. I did let Ms. Montigny go a little bit further, but it really is 3 minutes. So just to let you know, thank you so much. Ross McLennan from Hilltown.
Ross McLennan, Hilltown. First of all, I reviewed the pretty extensive amount of work you did over the last couple of weeks. I was pretty happy to see it, and I'm excited tonight for the 9th grade presentation, and definitely appreciate all the changes I'm seeing. I want to talk about policy. Some of it's been covered, but I'm going to read this. post that was done by ACLU Nationwide, breaking the Supreme Court declined to review a federal court ruling in favor of a transgender student challenging a discriminatory restroom policy at an Indiana public school. The lower court's ruling remains in place, requiring the school to treat trans children equally. That's our Supreme Court. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ross. That is it. That's all I have for public comment. I do have leave, but that's, you said you wanted to do that at the end, correct? All right, thank you so much. Thank you for everybody that made public comment. So we're gonna start with Personnel Committee, and I'm actually the chairperson. I'm Carol Chirino. Thank you again for all being here. We're gonna start, if you see on the agenda, with job description updates, and Tanner Lawson will go over that. Thank you.
Sure. We have 5 job descriptions that we have updated. The Director of Safety and Security, the Director of Student Services and Title IX Compliance Officer, Security Guards, Staff Nurse, and Certified School Nurse. Does anyone have any questions regarding the updated job descriptions?
Can you go through briefly and show the change because they're all minor?
Sure.
Just
So for the Director of Safety and Security, that position is being added to the Act 93 group, so that is the only change to that job description. The Director of Student Services and Title IX Compliance Officer, so that position is the current Director of Student Services? Pupil Services, sorry. Pupil Services, that job description is very similar to the one that we currently have. We are adding Title IX Compliance Officer to that position.
I thought number 4 on that one was going to be removed.
Which was the director?
For the Director of Pupil Services. Based off of communication today, Ron.
Oh, on
On the Title IX, I still see it
Compliance officer?
posted.
Minimum of 5 years. I'm sorry, under qualifications?
No.
Essential duties and responsibilities.
So that is currently what's in the Director of Pupil Services job description. But if that's something that the board chooses to remove, then we can remove that from the job description before it's posted for board
Which one was
approval.
that, Jordan?
The coordinate and lead diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives
Oh,
across the
that's supposed to
district.
be,
Right,
You would like
that's
that
what's
removed?
on there.
I
Yeah,
thought
that's,
I communicated, sorry. No, it's still on.
yeah, it was on there from Jen.
Yeah, I saw
Sellers,
it.
so there wasn't anything that was added.
What?
Number 4.
Number 4, under
Okay.
essential duties.
So when this goes on the agenda for Monday night, that number 4 will be removed.
And then could just some elaboration on the Title IX Compliance Officer. I know we haven't had anybody that was a part of that or heading that in the past, so I understand. I think it's appropriate to add that piece to the title. But then any specifics as, I don't know if you can add on to as to what kind of more specifically that means.
Sure.
Can we go back to number 4? There was a different one there, it said DEI committee or something. That's the
what's-
one I have to take off. I didn't see this one.
Which says coordinate and lead.
Yeah, that was the only one that was in the end. That was different. The one that's-
If you would like that, if there's one in here for the DEI committee, I can remove that as well
Is that a
before.
different job description?
I thought it was this one
It's
right
the,
here.
it's
I
just
thought
that
it was
one.
Yeah,
It's just that number 4.
it's just that number
But it's
4.
Mhm.
specifically said before, DEI, this is something different.
That may have been from when he come in.
Tara, can you also explain how with your position, there was that Title
Mhm.
IX component? So
Mhm.
the whole Title IX isn't new. Can
No.
you just explain so that everyone understands?
Sure. So the Title IX position is not new. It is something that all districts are required to have a Title IX coordinator. Title IX coordinator falls under my position. But adding this Title IX compliance officer to the Director of Student Services will allow that individual to handle Title IX complaints that deal with students and involve parents in those situations, where in my role as the Title IX coordinator, I deal specifically with staff members. But it'll also give us that opportunity to work together in collaboration on all Title IX investigations, whether or not they're student related or staff related. So it just gives us that opportunity to have some collaboration.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah,
I just feel like it's just not, I know there's been like some concern about what it actually is and what it would deal with and how it's kind of broken down, just with Title IX being a hot topic just right now too. And I don't know how to make it more specific, but I don't know, yeah, I don't know if you can add just.
So for example, what I would like to do and propose for the district is if we have under our Title IX tab, we would be able to, let's say a student goes home and says they were target of a discriminatory attack. I want a mechanism where a student or a parent can go online, fill out a form of sorts. It goes to our Title IX compliance officer, and this person can initiate an investigation. The parent will have a form. It's not just hearsay. It's not just an email to the principal. And I think it really, really will house this information and have a mechanism through which we will have solid, when we're accused of not following or being out of compliance with Title IX, being out of compliance with allegations we heard some allegations tonight. I want to be able to have information, have a process and systems that our parents and our students have at their arsenal, so we are ensuring that we're following up. We have a mechanism, do an investigation, and it also takes the burden off of our Director of Human Resources, where adds more versatility to our table of organization, but really having a documented process and system where we have in place. So you go look at a lot of other school districts, neighboring school districts, Palisades for one, click, and it just gives an entire process that a parent can fill something out, and we know we have followed through, and this person will go out to the school, interview a student, a teacher, and have everything, a system of checks and balances, so to speak.
And then, so I think that's good. And once, like those forms, will that just be something that you email out to families, or will we bring those forms
We
up
can
during
direct
the meeting?
families to this. It would be my intention, working with board leadership, to do a board orientation and have the compliance officer maybe do a presentation. I'll do a presentation that this information is available, and should our students and parents need it.
Since Title IX is like a federal level, how is it tied to our funding? Like, do we also need this in place to prove that we are compliant with Title IX and things like that?
I think that, I don't know if I'm prepared to answer that. If
Okay.
it's tied to funding, I would be more of compliance.
Yeah.
Just making sure. A lot of people think Title IX is just athletics and uniforms. It goes a little more with civil rights, et cetera.
And this will establish a paper trail,
Yes,
which I'm assuming we don't technically have.
correct. I mean, now, if a complaint, Tara would get, or Director of Human Resources would get the complaint now. She would go out to the school, conduct the investigation. It's just very, very, can be slow, cumbersome, so. I think this streamlined process is better than what we have now, which is null.
And then I have another comment around number 4. If this was part of the job description that was already here, like what exactly did that entail then? Because it wasn't a committee.
I want to revisit that, because it's the line I said was the DEI coordinator or something. And,
Well, that is what this says. It says coordinate and lead diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So what was that?
I wasn't here when that happened. so-
Oh, no, don't mean to put anyone on the spot.
Yeah, I wasn't here when that.
I mean, I can skip a little bit to it. So before I was in this position, there was a group of, there was a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. And the person before me, Dr. Drew, did run that. So I believe that's where that part of that job description came from, was to lead that and put that piece together. Since then, there has not been much work done within that realm.
So it was linked to the committee.
It was, my understanding it was, yes.
So when we do training, working with the kids, who leads that as far as bullying and things like that?
It could be the school counselors, it could be taught by the health and PE teachers, in particular in health. I've witnessed it done there. It could be done with, depending on, your planned course of study. I've seen it done with social studies teachers in the past, so.
But who coordinates that from an upper level standpoint?
I would imagine the Director of Student Services would be something that would coordinate with building principals and
Any other questions?
Well, yeah, I suggest taking it out, but I don't hear what everybody else says, so it's not my decision.
I guess,
go ahead, Carolyn.
I guess if it's unclear as to what that means, and if only it means is to coordinate another DEI committee with, that, we all saw how that turned out. So I don't think that should be, if that's the only reason that that's in there. Now, if it's supposed to mean something else, then I would like to know what exactly that means. But if what we're going by is what Ms. Summer says, I don't see why that should be in there, just because if that's the only reason. And how do we find out? I guess.
Well, I think we found out that it was linked to the committee.
Right, so if there's no, so that was the only, okay, well then I would say that, I would say that.
Well, I would like to see somewhere, like, I'm not sure, in this first separate discussion, but like bullying is a serious problem. If we're not really sure who's coordinating, we should talk about it. I'm sure you're probably right about student services, but those type of things that we want to help
I wonder
should be a
Robert, if it's in
responsibility somewhere.
I wonder if it's in a policy too, and it might even say who
I
that
think I know
might
that
fall
the bullying
under.
policy is actually up to for it to be reviewed also. I did notice that better.
Yeah, that's one of the ones.
But it would be, I would agree with Mr. Barrios is that with the bullying that you're talking about is under the people services, but under the policy it should
I
say.
don't think it says it here, so.
Right.
And maybe a focus on the building of something positive, fostering positive school culture or something like that within buildings.
Right.
That could be something
Maybe
that falls
in here.
under this job that would address what you're bringing up, the idea of the
Yeah.
bullying and the issues like that. And that's something that absolutely every single parent is going to want in the school, positive school culture for their students so that every student feels welcome, 100%.
Yeah, no, and I like that verbiage too, just positive culture.
Can we take a look at that?
Right, because I don't see that here either, even something like that.
Well, I do understand like the committee itself, obviously they're not going to well here, but I do think that the district has a responsibility to at least be monitoring these things. And so maybe that's part of the things that the Title IX coordinator will now be doing too. But I just don't want taking this out to leave a gap in us just keeping a pulse on what's happening, like even just the data aspect of it. AAP enrollment by just like how are we doing? And whatever that ends up leading to, we can address as we see the issues, but just like who is responsible for that component of it. I don't want to lose that if we take this out.
we can always revisit this job description too and make sure.
Put it all together in something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think what's throwing people off and even in the community off is like the DEI initiatives, right? Like that phrasing in there is that we've already decided that there's going to be these initiatives and we're going to be doing them. And I think what we want to communicate a little bit more is it's not necessarily that we're going to be implementing all these initiatives, but we do want to be watching it. Like it's our
Monitor.
responsibility to make sure that if something is coming up, that we're doing something to address it.
And I think that what you were saying regarding the tab, I think that's part of it, is that we're addressing it. They're looking at it and it's getting that data
Yeah.
of it being addressed.
Right.
People know
Equitable
and putting that out,
practices or
that's
something.
exactly.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
so
Title IX
practices.
isn't just like processing complaints as they come in and things like that, but it's also the kind of like the monitoring
Yes.
of,
Right.
okay.
Compliance
we
is
would
not
wanna
just
see that.
complaints. Compliance is also, do we have the data? What information are people being treated equally?
And we would want to see, I think we as board leadership would want to see that,
Yes.
what's coming out of that. And if we are seeing there's an increase in bullying in some way, or what we've been saying with vaping and happening, what are we doing? And if we're saying that all these complaints are coming in, then what is the next step of what are we doing?
And opportunities, right?
Right.
Like making sure there's equal opportunities. Okay. Okay. So we're gonna just like reword some of these things
Yes.
around the Title
Yeah.
IX and things, okay.
So then we're bringing this back
Bring it back.
to
Yeah,
next month?
if we come up with something and everybody approves it, then but I don't think it would. Does this have to be done?
So then this won't go on.
No, we're hiring them.
Yeah.
Right,
This is gonna
right.
slow
This is just,
down
for-
him
this is
coming
just
in,
to
right?
approve the
Job
job description.
Yes,
So
okay.
then this just won't be on this month's
Right.
board
Correct.
meeting.
We'll
Okay.
bring it back.
Okay.
We should make a read just to make sure.
Well, and by then, he'll be here
Yes.
too,
Right.
right? So it'd be good to get his input also.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. He can define his own job.
The next job description is school security guard. So there's not many changes. The first change to that is that they will report and be evaluated by the Director of Safety and Security. Since the Director of Safety and Security has been a new role in the district, we are adding that they report to that individual, as well as a lot of the, the essential responsibilities and duties referred to the Penridge High School campus, whereas now security guards are being used district-wide. So we're changing the language in this job description from Penridge High School to district-wide. There's number 8, also talks about attend and facilitate Saturday programs. We no longer have those programs, so we're removing that from the job description.
Number 8,
Number 8 is getting,
It's crossed off. Security.
this is,
oh, I think you're in a different one. It's the security.
Security guard.
oh, I'm the Director of Safety, so not that one.
Yeah, security.
Okay, other one.
Are there any other questions with the security guard job description?
Sure.
So the staff nurse job description, there are no changes, but we've changed the layout of the job description, so we're just updating the layout for the staff nurse job description. And then the certified school nurse, again, there aren't many changes. There are a few things that we removed based on that buildings are not necessarily, or that the position is not necessarily overseeing those tasks anymore. So when we talk about time testing, that's something that that's not something we do at Penridge anymore. So that's being removed. Number 5, so provide the human sexuality and AIDS instruction in the elementary division. Again, that's not something that the CSNs handle. They do not provide the instruction. They are the resource individual for school personnel regarding various aspects of health education, but they no longer oversee that.
Who does?
I held in B.
Okay.
That, yeah.
Sure. Are there any other questions regarding the certified school nurse job description? Okay.
Sorry, did we skip, I feel like we skipped to the Director of Safety and Security, and we're just talking about the one. 'Cause they're both on here,
The Director of Safety and Security.
right?
So the Director of Safety and Security, the only piece of that is changing is that they are now being added into the Act 93 group.
Okay,
So at the end of the job description, it now says that they're part of that Act 93.
okay,
It's
and
still
only,
the superintendent.
okay, but then just,
And-
because it's in a policy, because I know we talked about this before, previous, to who they report to. But in one of our policies, it does say only the superintendent. I'm fine, I'm open to obviously having it the assistant superintendent as well as the superintendent, but I don't know if that matters. I know we discussed this before, because I was saying I think it should just be the superintendent, just because I feel like with safety and security, I don't think you should have to go through hops like Director of People Services and superintendent. I feel like you should go straight to the superintendent, especially when you're dealing with safety and security. So I don't know if it matters, but I believe in one of our policies, it does only specifically state that the Director of Security and Safety reports to just the superintendent. I'll find it, I should have written it down.
We can take a look at
Yeah.
that policy as well.
And-
If that's something that we need to address in policy committee, we can try to address it there, or
Mhm.
else we can bring this job.
I just, and again, not to just keep pushing on it, but I just feel like when you're dealing with safety and security, it's just better to have like one point person, because if you're going through so many, I don't know, I've seen it go, like sometimes they get directives from so many different people, or not sure who to go to or get answers. I know there's been some frustrations with our security officers here as well as in other districts, because it's relatively new, that schools have safety and security officers. So I don't know if that's something, I understand why you want 2 people, but just to have, I don't know how other people feel about that. I just feel like that's a huge thing.
You want the quick pace.
Right.
When you're responding to an emergency, I want to know, so maybe something along the lines of, we'll report to the superintendent. If not available,
Then,
then the assistant superintendent.
Why was it said in the beginning to the assistant superintendent?
Well, the way we structured it now is Mr. Palmer's going to oversee security, so there was a shift in job descriptions. So
Okay.
initially, the director of safety, security, reported to Jen Summers, and I thought it would be more appropriate to have the assistant superintendent oversee this, especially in light of all the Act 55 training that Mr. Palmer will be arranging. It's a mandate by the state. Thought that position would coalesce well. But I will be intimately involved with our director of security. We've had a couple of incidents where he has been, report directly to me when matters are very, very serious. We can have both of us. I'm okay with the director of security reporting to me directly as well. But I thought the ideal match would be with Mr. Palmer.
and if if he's overseeing more of that, then maybe he's the direct line first. I don't know.
When we changed the job description for the director of administration, the director of security was reporting to Mr. Palmer.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, so we should double back on the policy if we didn't change it or whatnot, but then I think that's good. There's a point person and it's just easier, more cut and dry with decisions like that.
All right, thank you. The next we'll be going to is the Identigo, which is the FBI fingerprint employee clearances.
Sure. So in the past, when all of our employees have to have their clearances renewed every 5 years, and so when we get to that point where a lot of the employees are coming due for their renewal, we have brought Identigo here to schedule their FBI clearances. So we're getting close to that 5-year period again, where a lot of our employees are going to be due for their clearance renewals. For the remainder of this year, we have about 142 employees that will be coming due, and next year we have 438. So what we would like to do is bring Identigo on site again for convenience for our employees to be able to renew their clearances. There is a cost. The cost for them to come for the remainder of this year would be $400, and the cost for them to be on site next year would be $600. They would be here twice at the end of this year, and then they would be here for 3 dates next school year.
That's about 600. More people.
And we do have the money in the HR budget for this year, as well as we will be budgeting for that next year.
So if we didn't, they have to go to one of those places
would have
and
to
take
go
their
to-
time.
Right.
Yes,
Does the
400.
staff still pay them for that?
they do.
Okay,
They
so
would
we're paying
schedule
them to
a-
come here, okay. We're handling the convenience aspect of it.
The objective is just, it makes it more convenient for our
Yeah.
staff to go in for this mandatory process to get their clearances.
So it'll be
Bring it
for
in-house.
if it's 2 days, so if an employee can't make it, they still
They would still
Yeah.
have to go.
have to go.
And then they would sign up to have their fingerprints done here instead.
Is there a standard charge for this, or would they charge comparable to what the other place would charge?
They charge their standard
Okay.
charge, just as they would if they went off-site.
Their discount?
They don't have to drive.
Yeah.
They don't have to drive, that is
Yeah.
very true.
Save a lot of
I
money.
feel like
Save
there's
a
like
lot of
a
time.
group
The
discount.
discount is time
It's
saving.
time.
And sometimes it's hard to schedule those appointments when you
Yeah.
have to go in for your fingerprints, so it just makes it convenient.
Any other questions? No? All right, perfect, thank you. Next, we're gonna talk about the IBX teledoc discussion.
Sure, so we were, as an administrative team, we've been looking at ways that we can support staff. And one way that we've talked about is through teledoc. It's offered through our medical provider. It is you can have an app. You can schedule a doctor's appointment. It's 24/7. There's a doctor there for you. It supports the staff members as well as their families, anyone that's on our medical benefits program. So the cost for Teladoc, adding it to our insurance, is 71 cents per member per month. But when you look at the cost that you pay for Teladoc versus the cost that you pay when you go to an emergency room or an urgent care, there is a savings. So when you look at the cost, so let's just say 60% of urgent care visits were now transferred to Teladoc. So 60% of 435 is 261 visits. So when you cost that out and you look at the administrative fee, if you're pulling 60% of those visits, there will be a cost savings for the district of around $17,000 just bringing in that Teladoc. That doesn't apply to the convenience of if you're a parent and your child wakes up at midnight crying with a fever, their ear hurts, they're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can call in. If you're a staff member and you just need to get a prescription refill and you don't want to take a full day off to go to the doctor's, you can schedule that appointment through Teladoc. You can hop on during your planning period or your lunch, and you don't even have to leave. You don't have to take the day off. You can meet with that doctor and they can call you in a prescription. So we've talked about it as an administrative team, and we're recommending that we add this to our contract with our medical provider for our staff members.
I know a lot of districts do use something similar to this. What have we found versus, like, I know they have like telemed and I don't know, there's a bunch, and is this one just most?
This is the one that, this is actually through our insurance provider, and this
Currently,
is who they
they go
currently
with,
work
okay.
with. And on top of just the urgent care or the Teladoc visits, they also offer behavioral health as well as dermatology through the Teladoc visits as well. So it's not just for those doctor visits for that could replace your ER or your urgent care. It's also for dermatology and behavioral health.
So can they prescribe through there?
They can.
And then what's like, I know sometimes it's a cheaper copay too to use the Teladoc versus your primary care. Do we know like what that will price out?
Sure. So as a district, we actually have the option to allow our Teladoc to be zero copay rather than the $20 copay that they might pay going to their provider. We would need to look at that internally to see if we charge that zero copay versus what they pay in the doctor's office, how that relates to what our savings is. But we would be able to price that out, and I could work with Sean on how that would how that would equate if you would like to.
71 cents per month I might just get the whole number together so we can see.
Yeah, I think we do an analysis for the school board, but I think this is an excellent opportunity for our staff. So let's say a staff member's home, they have a child that's sick but they can't get to urgent care, they log in and I know there's MD Live. It's a similar platform, and you get on very quickly with the doctor, and they can prescribe medications. And also, there's the mental health component. So if someone's in crisis or they need to, a therapist of some sort, it can be arranged, and it's just in the privacy of their home. And the technology is amazing through the app. I know you can take a photograph if you have a minor wound or a dermatology, and it just really. I think just helps our staff with wellness and not having to go to urgent care or these other providers. So. But we will certainly do an analysis on the cost.
Cost and is it in a budget now for this year or for next year?
It's not currently in the budget, but we could add it effective July 1st, and then we would budget it for next year.
Okay. At least we understand the cost. 71 cents sounds like nothing, but I'm sure that adds up.
Thank you. Next, we'll do the request for pricings, which will include the third-party administrator for healthcare benefits and the substitute staffing services.
Sure. So I worked with Mr. Dalbert on an RFP for our third-party benefits consultant. So the district has currently been using Mr. Steve Allen. He's been with us for 26 years. He is now looking to retire. So we're at a point where we needed to put out an RFP to see who we would be able to bring in as our new third-party benefits consultant. That RFP is due back to the district on January the 19th, so this Friday. We will review the applications that we get back, and then we will be looking forward to bring a new organization to the board for approval, hopefully in February. We'll bring it to the personnel committee and then for approval in February.
Do you do interviews with them, with the different firms, or?
Yes.
Okay.
And then we also have the substitute staffing service. So our sub-service has been with the district for about 14 years. And we aren't necessarily looking to change, but we're looking to do our due diligence and just put an RFP out there to see what other organizations might be interested or what that would look like. So that is something that we will be doing from the Human Resources Department in the near future. Our contract right now with ESS expires on June 30th, so that's something we will be moving forward.
Good.
Any questions?
Are there a lot of different organizations that will bid on that?
There's not a lot, but there are some others out there that I would be interested in looking at.
Thank you. Next is the Act 93 positions. There's the Act 93 agreement revisions, the Director of Safety and Security, School Police Officer, and the Director of Communications.
So we are adding to the Act 93 group the Director of Safety and Security as well as the Director of Communications. Both of those positions will be added to the Act 93 agreement. So in that agreement, you can see there's a red-lined version where it's just the addition of the two positions, and then on the last page, their salaries were added to the salary schedule.
Now, I did ask Tara about the Director of Communications, because I know we've had that before, so why would it be under the PA Act 93, excuse me? And she was saying it's because now he will have people, he will be supervising people, that will be the difference at the schools.
Content creators in
Right,
each one of the
any schools,
buildings.
right. That was the question that I had for her.
So before, sorry, because I'm not remembering, for even the Director of Safety and Security, what that position was not under Act 93. And you said it will be, their amount will be added to the schedule. And then at the end here it says, in red, it says Act 93, 215 days exempt. What does the exempt part mean?
They're an exempt employee. It has to do with non-exempt versus exempt and whether or not they're able to obtain overtime.
So then they won't be able to obtain overtime, correct? They won't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's a little bit of a stipulation to that. So school police officers who fall under Fair Labor Standards, there's a separate section for police officers, which that position is a police officer, so they can obtain overtime, where typically in the role of the Director of Safety and Security, if they were not a police officer and they fall under that administrative position, they would not. But based on his position and his qualifications, he would be able to obtain overtime.
So he would obtain overtime as well as the salary?
Yes.
Okay.
Based on Fair Labor Standards, yes, there's qualifications.
And what others, sorry, can you give me more specifics then of what will change under Act 93 specific to what he did not have before, the director or the position?
So his position fell under the miscellaneous agreement,
Okay.
and now it would fall under Act 93. I would have to go through both of those contracts and I
Okay.
can define what they would receive.
Even for the Director of Communications as well, just like a little bit of differences would just be helpful.
Would you like just like a chart
That'd
that
be great.
shows what the differences
That'd
are?
be perfect.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I should have asked for that earlier, apologize.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'd love to see that too. Yeah,
Mhm.
Perfect. Then that Personnel Committee, we're done with Personnel Committee. Our next Personnel Committee meeting will be February 5th. Next will be Curriculum.
Brad Merkelkamp, co-chair of the curriculum committee. Unfortunately, Ms. Pateki couldn't be with us this evening. So first up is the 9th grade social studies update from Mrs. Jenna Vitale.
Hi, I'm Jenna Vitale. I'm the supervisor of social studies and ELD. And we are bringing the Early American 9th grade course and proposing adjustments to our Early American History course. The rationale we're moving from American Studies, which is the current 9th grade course, to Early American History is repetition of content and redaction of content. You see there, I have listed on the left the content that has been repeated from 8th grade to 9th grade, which in Early American History is not repeated as to the length that it's repeated in American Studies. And then the big concern is on the right, the redaction of content, nearly 100 years of that content, so starting at westward expansion and going to reform movements through the Industrial Revolution, slavery, the Civil War, and Reconstruction. Our current course, these are the units that are contained in our current course. So this is a thematic approach to the early American history. So we have America's founding ideas, the United States Constitution, equality and civil rights, the progressive movement, policies and institutions in America, politics in America, and economics, as compared to our early American history units. And I also included the timeline of those units. So we begin the year with the age of Jefferson, rise of Jacksonian democracy, transformation of America, westward expansion, the antebellum era, American Civil War, Reconstruction, and a new nation. So that's, if you want me to go back to the other slide, if you take a look from about the 4th bullet point down, there's not a whole lot of American history per se. It's very thematic. So as a curriculum committee and as administrators, as teachers, we felt that moving back to this focus where it's more of a logical and coherent structure was more age appropriate for our 9th grade students. So the adjustments would not add too much time. The first adjustment would be to add 2 additional weeks to the westward expansion unit where we would include the age of Jefferson. Then another 2 weeks in addition to westward expansion to add the Native American Removal Act, which has been redacted from the current course. And then the adjustments to the antebellum unit doesn't need to take any more time. They're going to combine key parts of westward expansion that needs to be kind of shifted over and put them into the antebellum unit as the students learn the difference between the North and the South. So total time of 4 weeks of adjustment, adding 2 to westward expansion, 2 to antebellum. And there's a link here to the early American history. Before we go to the American history course in Atlas, we have plenty of opportunity for civics and economics at Penridge if that was the concern. So we do weave civics, government, and economics throughout social studies from grades 1 through 5, and then additionally it's covered extensively with that historical content, the logical timeline of historical content from 8th grade, 9th grade, and 10th grade, so it is woven within all of those courses from 1st to 10th grade. And then our additional elective offerings are American government and citizenship and economics, international relations, and financial foundations for that economics piece.
So there's a lot to unpack here, and just to point out, I know it got posted for the public I guess I checked yesterday and it was there, but before, when we were originally supposed to have the curriculum committee meeting, it wasn't posted a lot for the public, the attachments, even the day before. So I was surprised that we didn't get a lot of emails for that. But on top of that, you say the civics, government, and economics are woven throughout grades 1 through 5. So my question there is, we don't have any consistency right now in grades 1 through 5. I'm not sure if you're speaking upon that for what's coming up for next year, because right now there's no consistency, so there's no curriculum specifically for grades 1 through 5. I have a 5th grader right now, and they are in science now, marking period 1, they did social studies. There wasn't anything on government, economics, and civics. It was more so actually on early American history. So when you say that it's woven throughout, I guess I would just like more specifics on that, of where it is specifically, and consistency in all the grades 1 through 5 across all the elementary schools. And then I just want to point out from the first slide about redacted, the 100 years, that I think it was 77 years, I'm not sure if exactly 100, but it wasn't, it was supposed to go into the other grades, which was mentioned in previous meetings. It's not something that was just going to be eliminated, so I just want to clarify that. And then again, I'd just like to mention one other thing. I'm not specifically understanding the recommendation. Is the recommendation to go for the required social studies courses to be go back to the early American, modern, and world? Is that what this recommendation is? And then American government and civics would be an elective? Is that what, I just wanted to clarify.
Well, do you want me to answer your first question? Do you want me to go in order of starting with elementary?
Yeah.
So in elementary, yes, the consistency issue. So I'll address the consistency issue. All of our 1st through 5th grade teachers are teaching the same themes, the same units.
Where's that found though? It's not anywhere on
we have
Atlas curriculum.
Right. There is an old Google document that the teachers have been using as a guide, and we are in talks to make adjustments to elementary school. That's kind of the next step in my presentations in the coming months, is dealing with that issue of consistency.
So wouldn't that be something to be done first, then state that it's woven throughout? We don't really have that concrete information.
We don't have consistency in resources. We have consistency in what is being taught. We don't have consistency in resources. So if you go to a 3rd grade class in one school, there's a good chance that they're using a different book in a 3rd grade in another class, but they're all teaching about bison at the same time. Or they're all teaching about the revolution at the same time. Or they're all teaching about our world or our country at the same time. They're not using the consistent resources. So therefore there is an inconsistency, but I go into classes all the time and they are all teaching the same thing. If you walk down the 2nd grade hallway, there's artwork that goes along with the social studies. So we do have a plan. It just hasn't been put into motion for grades 1 through 5 to get those consistent resources, so that when you walk into every school, they have the same books, they have the same timeline, they have the same scope and sequence. That is definitely one of my goals, absolutely.
Sorry, since you're going to order though as well, you said that there's a lot of redundancy as well, but again, and it's only because I have a 5th grader, and the teacher that he has does a great job with sending out the weekly things that they learn, and does a wonderful job. But already half of the social studies, because we alternate, was just on landforms, geography, islands, maps, artifacts, explorers, colonies, settlements. So again, like with throwing those things out there, I just would like to see more specifics.
When you learn about settlements, you learn about economics, you learn about government, you learn about
very
civics.
Very short. Like again, it's one marking period, so specifics would be.
Yeah, that's elementary, yes.
Right.
Yes.
So
Well, they only have 6 weeks.
But that's my point. So you're like, there's a lot of redundancy. I feel like there's not that much
redundancy was in 9th grade only.
the redundancy was in 9th grade only, so I'd like to make that clear. There is not redundancy in grades 1 through 5.
But you're
This
saying up
is-
to that point, that's why that's why you want to take away American Civics and Government as a required course because there's a lot of redundancy.
There was redundancy from the 8th grade course, our Foundations of America course. Going into American Studies, there was redundancy between those two courses.
Okay, so can we see a side by side of that, of where the redundancy is? Or maybe you could just email me that?
I could certainly, I think I might even have one, and I could certainly get that to you.
Okay.
But if we looked in Atlas, we would be able to see the side by sides. The 9th grade Early American History course was public, and then we added American Studies, and that's also public. So they've both been public kind of simultaneously.
Sorry, I guess I mean like these attachments that for tonight's meeting were not necessarily public until more last minute. If that's what you're answering to.
Yeah, I mean, this has been finished since before.
Right, but they weren't
February
posted on the public's website. Like they weren't posted for them. Like
The presentation wasn't posted,
Right,
that's what you
right,
mean, because
all the
they've been
documents for
posted
tonight. Like
at
it's a lot to
Atlas.
unpack. So I'm just,
So the repetition of content, that's from the 8th grade course to the 9th grade American Studies course. It's not necessarily any of the other grades. However, 5th grade does do some of these pieces, but that's a scaffolded piece.
yeah, so far not.
No, they don't do it until the end of the year. That's
So it'll be
absolutely right.
third marking period.
Yeah, they do it at the end of the
Or
year.
third quarter, I guess.
Because then when they get into 9th grade, they pick up right away with Americans, with the Age of Jefferson. And then it goes through, it's a very logical and coherent timeline for our 9th grade students, because we're also, we're teaching them how we got to where we are. And there's a lot of civics, government, and economics woven through this. You can't teach, most of this without also teaching those pieces as well. If we're looking for a finance course where you learn how to do the basics of finance, that's a completely different course.
Personal finance.
Yeah, personal finance.
Which is required.
Just required by the state of Pennsylvania.
We beat them
We
to
were
it.
way ahead.
It's a 0.5 though, right?
Or you can take
But
it
it's
as a
passed by
four-year
the state.
course.
Right.
State.
So what we're really proposing is these adjustments for the teachers to be able to take some of those pieces that would have been taught in the beginning of this year and bringing them to the westward expansion unit and to the antebellum unit.
When you say 2 additional weeks, what does that mean? Like,
That means we will have to make wiggle room and take days, whereas maybe one unit would normally take 8 days. We might shorten it to 6 days so that we can add those other 2 days
So we're
in,
gonna be
yeah.
carving out 2 extra weeks in what's
Yeah.
still left.
And to Ms. Blomgren's point from earlier, originally we were going to take those 100 or 77 years of history and put them in 8th grade and then put them in 10th grade. And so we started to do that. We took a couple hours of an in-service day and we did that. So if we did that, if we added units to 8th grade and units to 10th grade, we would be taking in 8th grade where they currently have 8 units to teach and they barely get everything that they need to get done in 8th grade because they have the PSSA exam and they have the civics exam that they have to take time away for. We would be going from 8 units to 12 units. If we added
put it in the 10th
that
grade.
time.
Not necessarily an 8th. You could put all of it in 10th as well.
We would be going in 10th grade, we would go from 11 units to 14 units. So it was very cumbersome and there were obvious redactions on our teachers' parts to make sure that we were getting that information in 8th grade and then in 10th grade. And the maturity and the prior knowledge level of 8th graders to have them do Jacksonian democracy, westward expansion, the antebellum era, and the Civil War in a matter of like 4 weeks we felt was really doing them a disservice.
Well, I know a recommendation wasn't even to go to 8th grade. It could have all gone into 10th grade as well. It didn't have to be divided into
Right. So
8th
that
and
would
10th.
that would make 10th grade 18 units long.
I mean, I also think a lot of school districts, like we do early American, modern, and world. There's multiple school districts locally and, you know, around that do world, and this could be something for another discussion, but they do world in 9th grade, and then they have American civics government, and then they have an American history. So I know a lot of districts that do that as well and don't have the early and modern. I mean, it's just something, if we're gonna, you know, continue to go down this road, and that's one thing, but I don't think there's enough redundancy to make American civics government an elective. I feel like there's a lot of districts surrounding us that have that set up, and they have that as a required. I'm not sure why the push is to have early and modern American history. And just curious too, I know you mentioned curriculum committee. So who typically is on the curriculum committee?
When I said curriculum committee, I meant me and my teachers.
Okay, so which teachers are like involved in, do you have ones from elementary as well?
Not currently, because we haven't been working on elementary.
But we did.
We did.
There was a lot of time spent with elementary. As a matter of fact, you spent a lot of time with elementary.
Yeah, last year we had about 15 of us in this room working on the scope and sequence for grades 1 through 5, and we were kind of chugging along for a while for elementary.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the civics exam then? Like, what all does that entail? If you can answer it quickly, I don't mean to derail this whole conversation.
No, so it's a standard that every student from every high school in the state has to graduate having passed the civics exam.
Yeah.
And so we opt to give it in 8th grade. It doesn't have to be given in 8th grade, but because they do the Constitution in 8th grade toward the end of the year, that's about the time that we give it. Last year, I think we had, was it 92%?
From 88.
Yeah.
And that was more under this method, right? Like we're.
Yeah, and I really do I don't see it as early American, modern world. I really see it as foundations of America, early American, and then modern. So to expand on early American after the students learn about the revolution and the beginnings of our country, and then to learn about the Civil War, and then come into like the world wars. It really flows nicely, and they get a very good prior knowledge and foundation before they go into that world history course.
So I mean, I feel like the civics being woven in, like even though it's not pulled out specifically as a unit, it seems like we're doing okay with civics. So when we're at that point that we're measuring it, there's always more civics to be learned though. But like how we set up our program, what exact history like sections we have, as long as we're covering it somewhere, like pulling it out separately as a separate course, is that like to be like an additional on top of what they already know to pass the civics exam?
But
or?
let me piggyback on that, because
Yeah.
to my knowledge, the civics exam, we get a lot of leeway. The teachers create the questions for the civics exam, or is it just very, the state gives us those questions? So every district has to take those,
And they use the same question.
the same exact questions?
Not in the
Not
same order.
necessarily.
I didn't think so, because
The
we,
U.S.
Exams locally
naturalization.
yeah, it's locally
test.
developed.
Yep.
That's what I thought. So we do locally develop that. So technically,
We use the U.S. naturalization.
so is that something that we could see or no?
Yeah.
Is that something,
Yeah.
'cause that's what I would be more interested in
absolutely.
seeing, like, that they
What they're
are.
coming out in
Yeah.
8th grade with,
With.
like before they even get in high school.
I mean, I know there's been some community members that mentioned that they would like to see American, like civics and government more later, like
Mhm.
before they turn 18, because it's more, I know that's where they have the AP, civics government to take as an elective for 12th grade. But I think it would be interesting to see the specifics surrounding it.
We can show all questions, but we can't
Yeah.
tell you which
Yeah.
questions we choose, because then the students have those questions
Ah.
ahead of time.
We
which
choose from
I
a pool of
did not.
100 questions, so we don't want the
Okay,
kids.
so that's what I thought. So you pulled
Yeah.
40
Yeah.
from the 100
Yes.
That's right.
that they give.
Yeah.
That's why we
So,
can't show.
okay.
And you mix it up?
Yes.
There you
And
go.
every year we change it.
Yeah.
So the coaches and I did a data study on it and looked at the questions that the students most often missed or most often got correct, and we adjusted based on that.
We adjusted the curriculum to make sure that they they understood and had the knowledge.
And that's almost at the end
I've been through that test.
Yeah, I'm so curious, just a social studies teacher, what are
Of
your
course.
thoughts on this? I'm gonna call you out.
Look, my thought on this is that the heaviest weight you have as a social studies teacher is figuring out which stories are in and which stories make it onto the cutting room floor. And when we're talking about something as important as the foundation of our nation, how did we get from a ragtag group of colonists to the world that we are today? The more time that we can give for the stories that make our country great to be told, the better. And so I don't like the idea of cutting so much of that out, trying to force so much of that into a 10th grade curriculum. Let's give them the 2 years. Let's give them the time to digest, to understand, to hear as many of the stories of how we got to where we are today as they can, so they can fully understand what it is to be an American, what it is to carry the rights, but also to shoulder the responsibilities of what it means to be here today.
But then let's rock the world and let's shake it up, and like instead of 7th grade being just geography, like let's get some of those stories and like that's where I'm at. I feel like sometimes we miss that we are a local entity and we do have a lot of freedom where we can do what's best for our students. So we're all passionate about this. So I feel like, and I love hearing you say that, but I'm like, like you even said about the rights, the stories, like it's all important. I totally agree. But then I feel like there has to be some way that maybe we could include more things in other places. And it might take a while. I'm open to like having the time of that, but.
And any good curricular review process, you're gonna look at these things every couple of years and figure out what's working and what's not.
Which is what they were just talking about, like
Right.
we're measuring against where we were successful, where we needed help, making the adjustments. And I think maybe to piggyback on what you were just saying, not being a teacher at all, but I do think there is something to, like, you get some facts and then you hear the stories behind it, or sometimes you hear the story and then get the facts, and like, you don't know what always is gonna resonate with a child, but the more you can kind of lace these things together, like I'm even thinking like geography, we're like, well, that does kind of speak to civics, because it talks about like the shape of our country, and then they'll be like, oh, that makes more sense why we have this many senators and how the electoral college works. It's like it does all.
There's a
build
reason
and
we call it
weave.
social studies.
Yeah.
When we pull in a U.S. history course, when I'm teaching a course, I'm pulling in civics and government standards, I'm pulling in history standards, I'm pulling in geography standards. I'm pulling all of those in because you cannot understand how these things go together without a firm basis in all of them. So when we talk about saying there's a 7th grade geography course, how can we understand how the world moves if we don't understand how the world is shaped? It's a foundational piece of knowledge that they're going to need and to build on. And yes, we can incorporate stories within that.
You
You're
could say the
not
same
wrong.
thing. You could say there's a lot of redundancy in geography from the grades. Like, so you could make the points and however you want it to flow. I just feel like it's like what is, I don't know.
I
what is the
think
best
within
way?
the geography course that you can interweave a lot of themes
Yeah.
and learn a lot about the country and really integrate through just beyond learning longitude and latitude and memorizing maps and capitals of states. I think there's some really interesting opportunities within the 7th grade geography.
There's
I
human
know
geography as well as
the way geography is taught today is very different than how I learned it at Neil A. Armstrong Middle School with Mr. Fliss, learning maps all day on a transparency. So it's evolved a lot. And I think
I'm not sure whether that memory is from a severe amount of love or a severe amount of terror.
terror. But
Is there a way to quantify that? Like, to your point, it's all mixed in there. How do we know we are teaching? I guess that's my question to you.
We are all
I mean, it's
very standards driven.
standard driven.
We are standards driven, we are required to teach. That's how all these courses are structured, by PA standards, or in science and GSS, steel, so on and so forth. but they are designed through that. That is what we're accountable for.
But we choose, again, they're not required, they're guidelines, they're recommendations, and we don't, there's a ton of standards that we also don't cover, and we choose them as a local entity, how we feel which standards are best to go with them. So, like, we choose them, we don't use all of them. I mean, not to bring up Vermillion, but Vermillion at one time with Vital, when you guys were working together, he did have all the standards and thinking that we used all of them, and that was something that we had to shave back and say, no, we don't use every single standard. We pick and choose and we tailor some of them. We don't use all of the recommendations and all the standards.
What standard do we use, or is there, can we get more information on that? Or, I mean, at some point, we have to trust that you guys are covering all the standards
They're all
and make sure
listed in
that.
that.
Everything is an atlas, and then the way we structure atlas is based on the standards, and then the content and skills within those standards, and then we build the big ideas and
What
essential questions
standards
from
are
there.
there?
They're the PA state standards. So when you go into Atlas, we can pick, and we ask Atlas to pre-load any standard in the world that you want, it's in there. So I can pick PA civics and government, and then I can go through there. I can pick PA history, I can pick PA social studies for writing, social studies for reading, economics, and geography. Those are the standards that the social studies teachers use, and they're all in Atlas, and I can show you how to see them if you want me to show you how to see them.
The ones that we hit.
Yes.
Right.
But the bigger, well, that I think is pretty common with standards, and like the standards usually
Right.
more than you
Than you
need,
need.
and then it's like what applies.
Yes.
Right, because they'll even give recommendations for resources, and that's just like for a guide, but then
Mhm.
teachers might come up with a different resource that they see that
Yeah.
fits those standards, and then they can choose that. So I feel like it's very fluid at the same time. It's very fluid, they're
Yeah.
guidelines, it's very fluid that you can.
I feel like I don't, I
Especially
don't work in
social
education.
studies.
I don't work in education
Right.
standards, but there's standards in
Right.
a lot of industries. And where you have to be careful is like usually the standards aren't, well, we say it up to date with the science and pharma, but like they're usually like, cause it takes time for people to meet and agree, and they're a nice resource, but we don't always want that to be what we're waiting for too, like if there is something.
It's
That
a
we
little bit
think
different
is-
than I know what you're talking about with
Okay.
like medicine. If something is standard in medicine, it means everyone does it,
Yeah.
and it has to be done a certain way. It's not exactly like that, but it's tailored for that grade level.
Yeah.
So and you want to be able to make sure that your students are succeeding at that standard. if that's
It's
good.
what students should know and be able to do when you take a course. That's how they are designed in the state of Pennsylvania and any other state, they all do that. And then you have liberty to go above and beyond those standards, to seek other standards, to combine standards. It's really about what it is that you want students to know and be able to do by the end of that course. That's why, as Mrs. Blomgren has said, there's flexibility in that. And that's regardless of whether it's the American Studies course or it's the early American history course. That's equal. You have that level of flexibility regardless. The state gives you requirements, and we also know that the state of Pennsylvania has tested courses. They tell you which standards to teach. You do not have flexibility there. They are not there yet in social studies, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that down the road. But that is how the standards work. So it is, what do you want the students at Penridge to know and be able to do? And that's how we combine standards, so that we create rigorous, relevant, coherent courses for our students.
Yeah, and like obviously not everyone goes into AP courses, but how are we measuring with the AP history courses, with students passing, like we're aligning that, because I understand that starts long before they're in the course, right? Like, we're tracking all of that too.
We do, and we have
Okay.
wonderful data for those courses that we'd be happy to share when we share all data. Or before that, I mean,
Yeah.
we did put out all the AP scores, and we do really well in those courses, and next month, we hope to be talking about an additional one.
Yeah, because I think I'd like to see us, like, I think there's a lot of really good ideas, and then there's like problems we're trying to fix, and I think there just tends to be some confusion of like, what's something that's like a good idea, maybe something we want to strive for at the next level, or like our next step in development, versus this is something we need to do because there's a problem, and because I feel like there's different timetables on that, honestly, but like if it's a problem, we obviously want to do everything we can to correct it, If it's like an aspirational goal, then this is where we do need to take the time to make sure things are lining up, that like as we're moving pieces, the other pieces are moving with it, because it's not just each individual piece, right? So I think, yeah, I don't see any problems basically with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next up, course updates for block schedule.
We're getting this first then.
Okay, we were just having, so, we're gonna just go through some of the updates that we needed to make to some of our high school courses because we're moving to block, and this is related, to opportunities for students to earn the credits that they need to earn, which the high school admin team's gonna talk about in a second. I'm just gonna go over what's affecting Lula, and then Jen will talk about social studies. So currently, and when we move to block, all high school students take 4 credits of English, full credits. So most of our seniors right now take 2 half-credit courses to fulfill their full credit need for their senior year. And because of the move to block and scheduling and looking at really making sure our courses are rigorous and the best options for our students, I'm making the recommendation to combine some of our current half-credit courses into 1 credit courses that are more rigorous and robust, but it's no new curriculum. It's taking courses we currently have and combining them. So the first one on the left-hand side is 3 current courses that we offer: Shakespeare 21, Survey of British Literature 1, and Survey of British Literature 2. And we would be combining all 3 of those half-credit courses into 1 credit course called British Literature Through the Ages, which would satisfy your senior English credit if you wanted to take that. The other course on this slide is actually taking a RELO course, College Tools, and a business and RELO course, Career Success Skills, and combining those half-credit courses into 1 credit course and adding a technical writing component to the course and calling it College and Career Exploration and Skills. So this would be for 11th or 12th grade students who are thinking about what are they going to do post-secondary. Are they going to go to college? Are they going to go right into a career? And looking at both sides of that: resume writing, interviewing, leadership skills, technical writing. There's a literature component to it, meaning studying careers or studying what you need to know for college, how to study, how to interact with groups, things like that. And then, so taking all of those and combining it into 1 credit course as well. Very excited about.
Is that, the college and career, that one, I know you said like the Shakespeare, they're combined with the British Lit. Would that be one that's required for them to take, or as well as this one, or can they choose?
It's one of the options. They can also just take that as an elective.
But for required purposes, like let's say they want to take something else, can they take this the college and career run as one of their, I know you need 4, as one of the requires of that? Can they do that, or do they have to take that college and career exploration as an elective?
It's not.
So it can't be considered as one of the 4. So right now, what are the 4 that are required that they have to take?
There are not 4 required once you are a senior. So
Like freshman, sophomore.
English 1 is our Work and Humanities, is our 9th grade course.
Right.
American Literature is our 10th grade course, and World Literature is our 11th grade course, and then it opens up your options as a senior.
So as a senior, you could take either one of these.
And this one. So we're adding another option as well. So right now we run Western Literature Honors. It's a full year 1 credit course. We've had this for a very long time. What I'm proposing is offering this also as an academic option. So you can take British Literature Through the Ages, or you can take Western Literature. There's some overlap, of course, because the time periods are together, but they are 2 different courses. One obviously is more focused on the British side of things and a whole Shakespeare component. This is more of a survey. And it will be a 1 credit course. In addition to offering this as our online option, we currently run online options for seniors in the English department, 2 different courses. They're a half credit. So this would be offering 1 course for your full credit option, as an academic online version or honors. So you can do this in person as an honors class, in person as an academic course, or online equivalent. And it's taught by a
and last question from me, but I have to. So Shakespeare 21 survey, British Lit 1, survey, British Literature 2. Combining all three of those courses into one, there's, obviously combining the social studies, the early American was caused a lot of issues and problems, especially coming from teachers. So why putting all three of these classes into one, where you're gonna have to shave off somewhere and you have to replace all this? What have the teachers been saying for that, the English teachers? Because that's three courses into one.
It's a little different because Shakespeare 21 is literally just a course on Shakespeare, and our enrollment over the last several years has been under 10 students. And
Because why? Because it's an elective?
I think it's just interest in reading
A lot of Shakespeare.
Right, but it's not required, right? So of course the enrollment is going to be lower. It's not required, sure.
It's not-
Compared to early
No, it's
and
not.
modern, that's
It's
required.
not required.
Right.
But nothing is required. I'm not replacing a requirement in 12th
Right.
grade with this requirement, so it's a little bit of a different conversation. But same thing with survey of British Literature 1 and 2. Most kids think you have to take 1 to take 2, so we often see the same kids repeating 1 and 2. We don't. They don't believe that necessarily, but again, those enrollments are low. 10, 12, maybe 14 is the highest we've gotten in the last couple of years. So it's really looking at it from a student lens. What is the most valuable use of their time to study the literature and go through the standards and the content and skills that we want them to study before they leave, and how can we do that in the best way possible? So taking Shakespeare and adding it to British literature is comical probably to English people because that's what it is. It's just that I didn't want to kill the course. I didn't want to kill Shakespeare when I could add him, he's dead, but I could add him to a more robust section in British literature is where it came from.
So then I guess what is all being taken out to have all three of them go together?
It's a little bit different. We're not taking anything out. We're still addressing the same content, skills, and standards. We're just choosing literature that fits into that time. So
Right, there might be some resources, maybe you won't get to some of the readings.
No,
You're able to do all of them in 3 courses
we're
for
taking
1 credit.
We're taking a half credit course and making a
3
1
half
credit.
credit courses.
Right, but we're addressing some of the same things in all 3 of those courses. And you have to take 2 of them. Now you only have to take 1 because we're addressing it all together. So it's not a cut and paste.
Like they're not
over
3
here.
separate ones, is what you're saying.
There's
That's what I'm
overlap.
understanding. There's a lot of overlap.
Correct.
So therefore it's because
There's a
of,
lot
There was
of overlap.
redundancy.
So that's
And
why
it's
you're
certainly-
I would
able-
assume there was
well,
probably some
these
Shakespeare and
elected.
Brit Lit.
Yes, there's some Shakespeare and Brit Lit currently.
Right.
Maybe a little Chaucer.
But so these courses though were more based on student interest, it sounds like. I'm taking a real course, but I'm more interested in Shakespeare.
So we looked at the program of studies. I've been looking at the program of studies for our 12th grade classes since before we even started talking about moving to block in the last couple of years, because we had so many electives for seniors. Practical English, literature, personal discovery, things that we weren't even running. Or we would run one section and then we haven't run a section for 2 years. And continuity in curriculum was an issue. Resources were an issue because we've started to really streamline what we are teaching and what we are using to teach that, because we want really good programming for our students. So there were some courses that we haven't run in a while anyway that we're turning into a full credit course. So we looked at what are the courses that we have been running, where do we see student interest, and then where do we see opportunity to maybe show kids that they don't like this yet, but if we can study it in a more rigorous, robust way, because now we have a full credit and a block, this is the best way to do that. So that's where these 3 courses have come from. As we get through next year and we're into block a little bit more, we'll have more options that we will want to bring for our seniors. But to start the process, these are my recommendations for the best courses for our seniors to get their credit and get their last year of English before they go on.
How will it affect the teachers since it's Shakespeare 21 survey British literature, the teachers that taught each of those courses and now it's going to 1?
Right now, 1 teacher teaches Brit 1 and Brit Lit 2, and 1 teacher taught Shakespeare. It's not going to affect their schedules necessarily. I mean, they might not. English department's a little flexible, because we never have the same courses with the same enrollment once you get to seniors. So they're used to, this year I taught Britlin 1, and next year I'm going to teach Western. Because they have to.
The social studies courses that I'm proposing we combine, again, are half credit courses, American Government and Citizenship, and Principles of Economics, and I'm proposing that we combine them into one course. I think it would make a very robust course. The teachers and I have discussed it, and it actually, they're very excited about the prospect of having this new course, and adding economics to government and citizenship just really makes sense, especially going to block.
But that's already what it's supposed to be currently, right now.
Well,
is the American Government, Citizenships, and Economics. So,
no, this is the elective. This is the half
This is the
credit
12th grade.
elective.
and you're combining what with it?
Principles of Economics. Those are two separate courses. They're both electives.
I thought there was only AP left since this one became the course.
No, there's AP Gov, AP Government.
So you're still gonna have AP Government?
Yes,
And this you're proposing as one
yes,
course?
yes.
So wouldn't that be redundant of what we have now?
No, this is a standalone course. This is truly a government citizenship and economics course without that piece of the timeline of history.
You mean like redundant with what's
Right,
been
but the
woven
course-
in that we're
No,
talking
not
about?
woven in.
This would generally
Because
be
right now
taken by
there's a-
seniors.
Right, so they would take either AP government or
Yes.
this. They wouldn't take one
And
then
this
the
is their
other.
last touch before they become voters.
Okay.
And so I think it's very important in that year where they're turning 18, they're going off into the world to truly understand their role in government citizenship and economics.
That's why it'd be great to be required as a junior. I turned 18 early my senior year. So I feel like it would be better to even have it required in 11th grade.
Update on block scheduling and changes to program of study.
I'm gonna switch screens up here.
I don't even know that's the end of that.
What's that? Either do I, that's fine.
We are very excited to finally be able to do this.
I think some of this presentation might help
Yeah.
understand the merging of classes.
Oh, that's fine, yeah. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity of hosting us. I think it would probably be important for me to start this by introducing myself. My name is Tim Ketty, and I started as a high school principal at the same time. Mr. Barrier started as superintendent, so this is my first time speaking to the committee or being in a public meeting. So first, I just wanted to introduce myself. And it is my absolute honor and privilege to lead Penridge High School into block scheduling next year. We're excited to offer block scheduling because it provides more choice to our students, provides more support for our college and career pathways, provides a deeper level of understanding through longer courses. Students will be able to take fewer courses at a time to support that as well. It's going to afford our teachers to be able to employ different paradigms and instructional strategies to help support students as well as build more meaningful student-teacher relationships. One of the particular things that I'm really excited about is also having embedded daily intervention time available to all students. In short, block scheduling intentionally promotes student flexibility and opportunities for all students. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention 2 years of planning that went behind this project prior to my appointment as the principal of high school. However, I'll take credit for it. But today's presentation is really the culmination of a comprehensive committee work, site visits to other schools, consultation with experts, collaboration with former board members, current board members, central administrators, building administrators, teachers, students, and community members. When I came in October, it was very comforting to see the collective work that was put in to this project, because I was clearly told by Dr. Scheid what my marching orders were. So I wanted to make sure we were able to fulfill that. Additionally, it's important to realize that the professional development behind moving to a block schedule started last year, all right, is ongoing this year, and is a constant point of focus as we move forward. Tonight, I'm lucky to be joined with Mrs. Garrett, who is our 12th grade house principal and also the identified liaison, administrative liaison at the high school for professional development, as well as Mr. Hughes, who is our junior house principal, who is the administrative liaison for our master schedule, and he'll be working through this presentation as well. I'm going to take 2 seconds to just thank my entire administrative team for your tireless efforts with making block scheduling a reality for Penridge High School, and I'm extremely proud to be working alongside of you as we progress forward. So that kind of brings us to the table of contents. I think it's important to note, because I know in the notes for this meeting, this was a program of study was also spoken about. There's a ton of information to go over, and we want to present it in a way that kind of makes sense. I'm going to kind of steal some other words here. We have to unpack it and digest it a little bit. But every slide moving forward is an excerpt directly out of our program of study, our drafted program of study coming forward. So Mr. Hughes, as the master scheduler, is going to be speaking about block scheduling. He's going to go over an overview of what actually our bell schedule is going to look like, how that is going to incorporate all of our students who attend tech school. We're going to talk about flex time, which is really our embedded intervention time on a daily basis, as well as even move that forward and give you present an example of a student schedule. I'm going to talk about the graduation requirements and the required number of credits, and then Mrs. Garish is going to give our first presentation of what we're calling a Scholars Diploma, which is another major emphasis that we have. With that, Mr. Hughes.
Hello, I'm Dave Hughes. I'm the house principal for the class of 2025. And one of the reasons I'm so excited about this transition to block is because I was a math teacher who taught exclusively in a block schedule. And so I got to see firsthand some of those benefits in the classroom as far as teaching and learning, as well as some of the things that Mr. Kenny brought up when it comes to career pathways, as well as just overall student opportunity. Okay, so when we take a look at our bell schedule here, the first thing you might notice, and Mr. Ketty alluded to this, was at the top of the schedule that flex time. And that runs from 7:15 a.m. to 7:40 a.m. Most comprehensive high schools offer some version of flexible learning time for their students. And it really varies in terms of how they format it. Currently, we offer our students flex time in the form of Rams days, where they have 45 minutes to meet with teachers, and that happens once every 6 school days. In our block schedule, we will offer flex time 25 minutes daily to serve 3 main purposes, and that would be to receive academic support from teachers, collaborate with peers and teachers, as well as access enrichment activities. All right. So beyond flex, you'll see some of the standard features of a block schedule, and that would be fewer class periods per day with a lengthened instructional time per class meeting. So currently our students have 7 classes per day that are 50 minutes in length. In our block schedule, we'll have 4 classes each day, and the length of time will be roughly 85 minutes. That lengthened instructional time allows our teachers to provide more deeper learning experiences, hands-on learning, as well as project-based learning, and really strengthen some of those teacher and student relationships. Note that Block 3 is a longer period of time, and that's because Block 3 will house our lunch periods. So there will be 3 lunch periods within Block 3. There's going to be an A lunch, a B lunch, and a C lunch. Students with A lunch will report directly to the cafeteria at the beginning of Block 3 for their 30-minute lunch, and then they'll transition to their 85-minute instructional block. Students in lunch C will have their 85-minute instructional block first, and then transition directly to their lunch, and then go to block 4. Students in B lunch will first go to their class for 43 minutes of instructional time, then transition to lunch for their 30-minute lunch, and then transition back to that same class for the last 42 minutes of instructional time. These lunches will be assigned purposefully, okay, and by design, certain classes, certain departments will not have that B lunch where there's an interrupted class period. So for example, science classes where there could be labs going on in any given class, we're not going to pause the lab, go to lunch, and come back to it. Okay, so that will be done with purpose.
The flex,
yeah,
oh, sorry, the question on the flex, is that something, you know, I know like we've done like busing, I know there's always been some complaints about how early the high school starts. Does this mean if they don't have work that they have to make up that time, can they report at block 1, or would they still have to?
That's what that means, but there are some details that will be within that, right? So some students might not have that option if we need to see them during that time.
Right, right.
Okay, but yes, that is what it means for a student who does not need to utilize that time to show up at the beginning of block 1 for attendance purposes.
Then obviously if they're a busser, they still would have to, but then they might be able, like that actually, sorry, that made me think of another question. If they don't have any work to make up, but they are a busser and they come to flex time, what does that look like?
Well, so there's going to be spaces within the school, some flexible learning spaces where they can have a cup of coffee, review their, homework, or study, whatever the case may be,
Okay.
as well as some other activities that would be put forth for students. So the gym being open where they can engage in some kind of exercise or other enrichment activities that maybe are outside of what would normally happen in the school.
So what, at the high school, we're currently involved in committee work with our teachers and students to fine tune all the details as far as what flex time is. But again, that central component of that time is provided that embedded enrichment time or embedded intervention time, whether it be from a social emotional standpoint or an academic standpoint. And again, to me, from that leadership role, having the opportunity of developing that inside the course of the school days is actual paramount and something that we're truly excited about being offered. And we're going to be flexible and open to what that looks like, but we're going to be invested in listening to all the stakeholders, that's the teachers and the students as well, to best capitalize on the time.
And in the flex committee work that took place.
I think there was a question.
And there's, during that flex time, are they able to meet, like, say there's like the robotics committees that they're going to start planning, that they're going to be able to, would they be able to meet during that flex time?
Like extracurricular activity.
Yeah, giving them that
Yeah,
opportunity
absolutely.
to do it during that time rather
For
than.
clubs and activities, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
I thought clubs can't meet during,
school?
yeah, why did I felt like, maybe not, maybe I'm thinking of something else.
And one of the most important aspects that when we looked at the way that flex would be formatted was just that student access piece. So student access to their teachers. And so as we look at the schedule for the AM and the PM tech students, there's two things that I want to note, which I think are really important here. And that is that both AM and PM tech students have the same access to the flex time as every other student at Penn Ridge High School, which was huge for us. The other piece that I want to point out is that within this block schedule, our tech students, regardless of whether they're AM or PM, will be increasing the amount of time they spend within their tech program at the tech school within the block schedule. So those times at the tech school have been increased compared to what they are currently, which is also a big aspect.
What are they currently?
Well, when you look at the side there, it notes the amount of time, and that's actually the amount of time they spend within the tech school. So, for instance, AM Tech, it says 7:45 to 10:40. That's really 175 minutes of time, but they do have to be transported there. So you subtract off that time, you're at 150 minutes. Currently, if you compare the 175, currently it's 161 to 166, somewhere in there. So they're gaining a good 10 minutes at the tech school, which is big.
You're saying that will increase their time. Now, I know, well, it's not here too, but I know at one of the tech meetings, the union rep, who's also a teacher over there, she was mentioning like the times, so like we shared Palisades, Quakertown, and Penridge. So sometimes for the teachers over there, like Palisades would arrive at a certain time, Penridge then arrives at a certain time, and then Quakertown, and then it's hard because the teachers will get like one group of students started, but then they have to get them caught up, and then sometimes there's wait time. Did you reach out? Is there like a plan for that? Do we know?
So we are in much better alignment now with the other schools. Currently, our AM tech, especially, is missing out on some time that those other schools get. And so we're now closer in line with the other schools to make it easier for the tech school to accommodate the 3 central schools. Here you're going to see a generic block schedule, which certainly oversimplifies the schedule and is not quite what it's going to look like for a majority of our students. But we'll get to a sample schedule in a second. In our current schedule, year-long courses are worth 1 credit. And a student could take a maximum of 7 year-long courses within a year. Okay? In a block schedule, those year-long courses, by and large, will become semester-long courses, still worth 1 credit. And as you see in this schedule, a student is then able to take 8 of those 1 credit courses within a school year. So an increase of a possible 1 credit that they can take within a school year. The schedule is, again, far more nuanced than this. Currently, we do have half-credit courses that are offered on a semester basis. Most of those courses in a block schedule will be offered as 9-week, quarter-long courses. Okay? So if we take a look at a sample schedule here, you'll see something that's a little bit closer to what a schedule might actually look like for a student next year. You'll see a mix of the formats. So a few quarter courses are in there, like Photography 1, First Aid CPR, as well as some semester-long courses. The formatting doesn't change the credit amount, which again is that a student can earn a maximum of 8 credits within a school year. Not only do students have an opportunity for more credits, but they also have an opportunity to pursue their passions and reach a higher potential. So I just want to, let's imagine for a second that this schedule represents a 10th grade student at Penridge High School. They're taking geometry in the spring semester of their 10th grade year, and let's just imagine that they fall in love, all right? Not with another student, but with mathematics, okay? So 10th grader, they fall in love with math, and they now have this dream. They want to take calculus as a student at Penridge High School. Well, here's what they can do within a block schedule. Their next year, their junior year, they can take Algebra 2 and pre-calculus in the same year. They would take Algebra 2 in the fall and pre-calc in the spring. And now, because of a block schedule, they're able to have those passions and pursue those lofty goals. And again, they would not be able to do something like that without a block schedule. Okay, so that's something we're pretty excited about. And that goes across the board, not just, a lot of people do fall in love with math, but that would work for any of these courses. Photography 1, they could start to really pursue those passions that you find in your high school years.
Can I ask a question? And if you're going to get to it, you can tell me you're going to get to it. How does this work with AP courses and aligning them with like the exam? And if you have a slide on that that's coming in.
We don't. So that's a great question. AP courses operate a little bit differently, and part of the reason is that we are preparing students for that AP exam with the potential to earn college credit. So many of, although not all of our AP courses, would operate on an every other day schedule, an AB schedule, okay? But again, that portion of students who are involved in that is less than the portion of students who would be taking these semester-long courses. But most of the AP courses operate on that every other day schedule so that from the start of school until the exam in May, they're getting those consistent touch points with their teachers, as opposed to all of it in the fall semester and then a gap until they take the exam.
But is it safe to say you could use the flex time to help review for the AP exam?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But, and
Rather than staying after school, so if a student's involved in extracurriculars, athletics after school, they could use that flex time to prepare for the advanced placement.
100%, and that's almost, you know, your question, your specific question regarding AP begs that where the program of studies meets what this looks like. Because we have sat down with every one of our department coordinators as well as the curriculum supervisors and went through every course to hash out what that would look like from a quarter to a semester and how those APs fit in. But that document is huge, and we couldn't outline that.
But you've gone through the different
Oh, yeah.
scenarios. So like, because I'm thinking mathematically, if you have an odd number of AP courses you want to take, like how would that work? But you guys have mapped all that out.
Yes.
And then my next question too is, are there study halls anymore then with this, or?
Yes, there are opportunities, and actually that'll
Okay.
fit into my next slide from a
Okay.
standpoint,
Yeah.
okay? Because one of our, the program of study will outline not only to the board but to the public how block scheduling is going to look for every particular course. But it also sets up what we consider our core values of Penn Ridge High School, right? So when it comes from, here's what a block looks like, student needs to pick courses, any exceptions to course selections will be submitted through their guidance counselors to the house principals, and then we'll have discussions at our level to make sure that we are making and meeting all student needs. And that's why we actually put this slide in directly from course selection. So as we transition from here's an overview of block, here's how we're also going to support students in their respective needs. Make sense?
Yeah.
So the answer to that question is yes. Which then brings us to graduation requirements. And what you'll see consistently in the banners is academic rigor and opportunity, because of the transition, as the transition of block scheduling increases our students' educational opportunities to take more courses, that also provides us that standard, again, to set our core values of what we believe is important for students to take as those minimum requirements, right? Academic rigor and opportunity. This is a big slide with a lot of information, so take a second to digest this. However, I want you to take a look. We were pretty sneaky here. The class of 25 needs to take 25 credits. The class of 26 needs to take 26, 27, 27 through 28. So in that sense, that's at the simplistic version. What's important for us to relay is that we believe that all students should take four of our core classes for their 4 years at our high school. All right, and I want to say that because that is value. So as you take a look at our phased in credit increase, it is based on that priority. All right. Now, what you would expect to see is in English, like if you go to class of 2028, you would expect to see 4, 4, 4, 4. Okay? But another core value that we want to instill is student choice and student opportunities, especially as it relates to post-secondary goals and or college and career pathways. So those increase of credits are seen through STEM, arts and humanities, and the electives. And that's done intentionally to provide student choice in how they're progressing through their high school career. For the tech students, you can see that far right is the outlook for what it looks for tech students in the year 2028. We didn't want to put more information in the slides, but there's a gradual progression and phase in of their credits as well. But it looks a little bit differently because all you would have to do is take the health and PE requirement, drop it to 1, and increase their electives to 10, all right? And that would satisfy that incremental increase of graduation requirements.
So
Now,
for
go ahead.
the upper bucks, and I know that
Mhm.
the question has been the social studies credits from 3 to 4.
Mhm.
So moving that to 4 social studies credits for upper bucks students, is that 4 required credits throughout all 4 years? I know we had discussed, like earlier, we had discussed about having the elective classes. I mean, and you know, community members have reached out coming up to this point about adding that 4th social studies credit for upper bucks, which I think I'm, you know, in agreement with them, is that if they have a block in their senior year of social studies credits, and they're on co-op, that's pulling another 85 minutes out of their ability to make that extra money. And I mean, in all fairness, some of these students at upper bucks that are working are, you know, in underprivileged, underserved homes. That extra 85 minutes of work is, I mean, if they're making $20 an hour, I mean, you're looking at another $30 in their pocket a day. That could be.
There's multiple pathways to satisfy, and the small print at the bottom really talks about how the class of 226, another graduation requirement is a 0.5 credit in personal finance or financial foundations. So that financial foundations course also serves as one of those social studies credits. One thing that I'll guarantee you though, because if I flip through the slide deck a little bit further, when it comes to those, to our credit requirements, there will always be an ability, all right, for us to take a look at what is in the best need of students.
Right.
All right, so there's those core values of what we believe our students should be attaining as they go through. Yet there is always going to be special circumstances which come up all the time that we need to take a look at that from an administrative team and make the required adjustments. Because why? Because it just makes sense for that individual student.
Right, and that's where I was looking at, you know, as far as having that course requirement for college-bound students being exactly the same for upper bucks students. While, I mean, any learning is great learning, you know, I think it does speak to the upper bucks students for being able to do their co-op and being able to have that extra time in co-op where, yes, they're out making money, but it's also a learned endeavor being out there, being able
But that's
to
where
understand.
and I, you know, until we would get into the specifics of what that student is doing, we could be utilizing that co-op to fill requirements if that's what made sense for that particular student.
But I feel like that doesn't take away though from the required extra course for the core. I'm like, just in the last tech meeting, there were 3 gentlemen who got gold, all from Penridge, and they talk about like the different certs they need and different things like that. And I feel like not only just co-op, but just they have to study. Sometimes they have to pass in all the different programs, and I feel like that would be taken away if they have to take that required course. So I don't know how I feel like for there's tech, I have twofold, because I feel like there's tech students, but I also feel like for students that might not necessarily be in tech, but also they might, like we offer a lot of great electives as well, and they might not be on the college track. And there's a lot of community members I know that are second guessing colleges now and how much benefit, because after college there's a lot of debt and you might not get a job right away, and looking at different pathways. So I know like our core classes are important, but I feel like it's to the point now with, are we really setting our students up for success after high school if they are not going to use a specific, if their pathway is not specifically to social studies? Like I have a handout, I looked at a handout, just talks about like subjects that should be mandatory in schools, like taxes, coding, cooking, insurance, self-defense, survival skills, things like that, where I would rather see us double down in pathways and more actual skills that they can take with them versus requiring the extra credit in social studies, because there are a lot of students that maybe they don't do well in some of the testing environments, and they do better with electives or more hands-on. So that's where I'm at, where I feel like we're kind of like if I'm about school choice, and I feel like we take that away from families and students if we require them to take that extra credit. And for social studies, I feel like nothing really, it did not really affect the teachers as to what, like they didn't lessen teaching classes, it didn't really push all the teachers around. It didn't affect them as much, so I feel like it's more the students that are missing out if they are forced to be required to take that course.
I feel like there's two pieces that I think need to come into play in this conversation. One is that I love the beauty of the flexibility. Like, hey, we're going to make exceptions. This is what, if we're going to look at an ideal situation, this is the ideal of what we want them to do. The other thing is, I think that looking at social studies as a course for kids who are college bound is an absolute mistake. There is one thing that every single kid that goes through our schools is going to have in common. Each and every one of them is going to graduate needing the skills of how do we participate in a republic. America's a republic. It requires our people to participate. It requires our people to understand their nation, their government, and how to work in it. Social studies is not a course for kids who are college bound. Social studies is a course that is designed to prepare students with the skills to participate in the American form of government that's been left to us by the founders. So saying that, oh, we're robbing kids of this because they're not going to college is, I think, a misnomer. This is not a college-bound idea. This is a we all need the skills to be able to participate in a republic idea. And yet there are kids who are going to get that in other places.
Right.
Which is why we have the beauty of the flexibility. But we have a responsibility as an academic institution, as an institution that prepares students for life, to make sure that they have the skills they need.
That can also fall on families, as well. So, and again, I would say that having that another elective or a different option and another skill that would also help them be just as successful afterward, I think is just as important. I feel like the force.
And therein is the beauty of the flexibility. Hey, we want every kid, ideally, to take 4 credits. You've gotten that through Boy Scouts. That's beautiful. Let's make an exception. Let's find a way through that. Maybe you don't need that extra social studies. You do need that extra science with your time at the Upper Bucks Technical.
The one piece of this, and I don't want to interrupt, because I would
be my guest. You're good.
How we've conceptualized that is that maybe not every student needs a specialized math or science class, but every student is going to be an active citizen from that standpoint. But what we're also, and I want to preface the great conversation by saying what we're talking here is our minimum graduation requirements, which are 28 credits. Students have the opportunity of earning 32 credits. So that flexibility is built within that half of our graduation requirements are specifically designated to STEM, humanities, health and PE, and then 10 electives. Plus, that's just 28. There's still another opportunity to take 4 more courses, which is a whole another semester, if you want to take it that, where students absolutely have the flexibility and freedom to do it. I think with the tech students, that's something that's a little bit different because they're tied into the tech, but that's where that flexibility will come in from our standpoint about doing what's right by students and what's right for students. So they're minimum requirements.
So they have more electives anyway?
Mm-hmm.
Did you show
when you look
schedule?
into it,
Did you show the
they
honors?
don't.
Do you have slides on the honors?
No, we didn't get that far into it. That
That was something we discussed.
The scholars.
the scholars?
Scholars.
Yeah, scholars at the end.
Scholars.
I'm sorry.
But would they be able to utilize, so say they go onto the 4 core courses, would the tech students be able to go and use an elective course, the time during elective course to perform co-op? Or, so they'd still be able to somehow maneuver that schedule to be able to get that extra time for co-op?
Correct.
Right.
I know you say about the flexibility, however, like when I looked into it more with the electives, I feel like, if you're a band student or in chorus, that sucks up a lot of your electives already. So you already are limited to any other electives that you'd like to do. Also, like the state only requires 21, which I'm not suggesting that we would go down to that, but we're at 24 right now, and then if you bump up to 28, I feel like we're requiring that, and I feel like like the world language, if you research, there's a lot of research out there, obviously there's pros, but there's cons to it as well, for, and I know that's on the scholars, but there's just certain things out there that say that maybe 2 years isn't as, you don't really learn a whole lot of that word language, but I know like colleges, if you are college bound, then a lot of them strongly recommend that. But I guess where I'm at is I feel like some of the electives get sucked up by certain courses, and then you really don't have a lot. And I'll be done, I won't continue to ask questions, but my last pieces were, the only part that I would be comfortable increasing would be the health and PE aspect, because like your point on social studies and how, you know, learning how to be in a republic, I feel like that's one huge, the PE side of things I think is so huge for the mental health. That would be the only one that I would be in favor of increasing back to the 2 credits. I know there wasn't support for that before, but I hate taking away, not even just tech students, I hate taking it away for all students to require something of them that's not necessarily required, where they could take something else that would truly benefit their pathway. If we're, you know, I know we have Mr. Dyer who's doing a great job with pathways, but I would love to see our efforts just, if we were gonna require something, it'd be more of like the mentorship, if something like down your specific pathway. That's where I could get more on board with something like that versus you have to take this social studies course. I know they have to take the 4 English because that's required by the state.
And as far as the special considerations, I mean, I understand it would be on a case-by-case basis, but how will it be established as far as what constitutes special consideration? I mean, is there gonna be an established list, like, how would we know?
The way that typically works now is that if a student has a special request or a family has a special request, it would typically go through a guidance counselor, through the house level principal, then come up to my office where we would have discussions. That way there's multiple stakeholders taking a look at what those circumstances are, so that correct decisions should be made, not necessarily in a vacuum, but made for the intended purpose of supporting the student.
Yeah, I don't know how to put something together just so that way we're not in a position where special considerations might make it feel for one student like, you know, versus another, where there's something that's not, you know, as somebody feels like they didn't get what they wanted,
Right.
where somebody else may have, and now suddenly we're fighting that battle.
And something I think that's important to keep in mind is that ultimately this 4-year credit, if we're speaking of social studies, for example, is not going into effect until the class of 2028. Part of the reason why we have this scaffold is we want students with their families, with their guidance counselor, really being very deliberate in their course selection as they make their way through high school. So a student who knows they have co-op, lingering, that's their goal, if they know they'll have a great opportunity working in a local company working with welding, they can plan their semester courses all through high school to get those 4 credits. They can, and remember, it's not really 4 credits, it's 3.5 if the student is taking that financial foundations class, which is required anyway.
Right.
It's required for them to take that. So it's really a 3.5-year credit requirement, and it's something that's being phased in with time, where students will be able to deliberately schedule and plan for meeting those goals. Because, as we said so eloquently, we're all citizens. We all need those active skills. So here we have the ability to help students plan to develop those skills by creating their pathway through the course of 4 years, and we're giving them time to do that with that incoming freshman class.
And even with doing that, and what I'm understanding is that there's still, with the electives, that possibility of the kids still being able to pick other courses, even with that.
Yes.
There's always that they're able to.
And
And if
there- and-
not, for whatever, you know, they can go to their building principal if that's for that specific child. Correct.
I would say yes, and I would say that we have, Jen is still here, about 15 different social studies electives, perhaps, 15 different social studies electives to choose from. So there's a great variety of courses that students can find, whether it's a sociology class, an American law class, an American government, citizenship, and economics class. There's a lot of variety and choice within there.
Maybe we could share some mocked-up schedules with the board, just so that they can see what a tech student schedule would look like, or could look like. Make sure they can fit in, you know, if they're gonna have a job, it'd be able to put
Right,
that
to make
in.
sure that the parent isn't concerned, because there are specific parents that may be concerned with this. There's, examples like Jordan have been, or Chris have been, just to kind of be able to see that, I think then we have a better understanding.
I think the students, to Mr. Kaufman's point, I think he's asked for just a clearly articulated under special considerations. So when a student and family are planning their courses, they're being guided by our counselors to,
Absolutely.
Do co-ops count as elective now, or do they?
Yes.
Yeah, so that if they're going early, they're getting credit and getting paid.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
Is there a concern that we're making kids pick a pathway too soon then? Like they almost have to decide freshman year what they think their path is. Like, are there worries about that? And I agree with Jordan in the sense that like there aren't a lot of elective requirements. And could we see some examples of like a child who is taking a language and in band, and they want to do the language all 4 years? What do they have left then? Where are their options in the schedule? If it's not every year, but maybe by junior and senior year, they could pick up a third elective. Like, where do they get to play around so they don't feel like they have to lock in as freshmen to some of these things? And
Absolutely.
or if
We
they
can,
love it, they don't have to drop it to try something new,
Yes, but it's also important to realize that there's always flexibility in changing pathways. But as an individual is going through their high school career and picking their courses, you can't have it all.
Right.
Like there are going to be a time, and one of the things that we need to teach kids is that there are, and I'll just say it, there are consequences for your actions, and that you might choose X path. Realize, hey, that isn't what I wanted, and then you have to rechange course. That's just human life and existence, right? For that individual who's picking the music, yes, that might mean that they can't take a certain elective,
right? Or if they
right?
do it for
But
a
that's
long
part of
time.
growing up. It's part of the
Right.
educational experience.
Right. But if we don't have to, I guess where I'm at is I love what you said. I think that there are consequences to our actions. That is life. I totally appreciate that. But I feel like if we're where we're not required by the state to have to do that, but we're gonna require
Understood.
that, that's where it's like the struggle. I get what you're saying. If I'm gonna choose music and I might not be able to choose other electives, totally get that, 100%. But that's where I struggle.
And I'm with you. I don't know if struggle's the right word, but it's also setting that foundational value of what we believe is important as an organization and as a school to help the students attain whatever goals they want.
Right.
Right? It's not necessarily just a free-for-all. I can pick and choose whatever I want. Here are your respective pathways. Here's a way to get there. How can we help you do that? And that's really what this is about. And it's saying we value the courses that we offer. We value the education that we are providing. This is Penridge, the community, the school. We want to make it meaningful for all of the students so that when any student graduates, they feel valued from whatever pathway they chose. And that's, there's always a balance. So I'm afraid when I flip to the next slide, you guys, your heads are really going.
No, it's like, if I can actually go here, there's the scholar pathway. Those students are choosing
Well,
that.
there's one more slide before that, right? And that's based on these required numbers of credits. So when we're talking about the overall education of students, I follow an author by the name of Tim Elmore. He's written some really good books on leadership. And he's spoken very strongly about preparing a path for a child versus preparing the child for the path. And in our view, that's the difference between required minimum credit graduation requirements and our required number of credits per year. So our graduation requirements is our responsibility as a community, as a school, to say, this is what you were required to graduate from school. By requiring a number of credits per year, what we're saying, how is it that we are helping you develop your path? Finding those requisite skills, because we value the courses that we offer and the programs that we offer. So from developmentally, you have we believe that our 9th and 10th grade students should be taking 8 credits per year. That means that they have a course in every block, all right? And that our 11th and 12th graders are going to be required to take the minimum of 6 credits per year. The difference between the two is from a social, emotional, cognitive, and academic developmental level. We believe that those 9th and 10th grade students need to be in front of teachers, whether that's at Tech or with us, learning the values of what education is alongside with their content. As students move from their 11th and 12th into their 12th grade year, as they mature and develop those skills, they need to be able to expand and be given further options for co-op and to explore different college and career pathways that meet their respective needs. That's the premise behind this. And then what we're saying as a community, what we're saying as a school to the community is, this is what we value. We want your kids in school, we want your kids taking our courses, and we want to provide that flexibility for you to attain whatever goals, post-secondary goals you may have. The caveat to that is that the seniors of next year would only be required to take 5. To me, the easiest answers to why we made that statement was because it just makes sense. They spent 3 years planning to graduate and have spent 3 years planning their course of study with an understanding that it was going to be 24. Is this block coming? Now it's coming, now it's 25. You only need to take 5. We hope they take all 8 courses that they have to be optioned, but all of those students didn't have the appropriate time to plan. From class of 2026 forward, they're going to have a full year to intentionally plan to ensure that they're meeting those requirements and those standards. Why? Because we think it's the best thing for students and how we're going to help them attain those goals.
So those years of 6 are the opportunity where you're talking about where, for all the consequence of your decisions, if there are other areas you want to explore, you can do it, but it would be
built
an
in those
additional,
opportunities to do
those
it.
more flexible ones. Okay.
So then that final slide, which goes back to it, is, and we'll definitely work on what that looks like. From there's going to be times where a student, a freshman may come in, and I'll just profile a student. The student struggled social emotionally, transitioning to the big bad high school, is taking a look at this program of study, and the counselors and the house principals are saying, hey, this student might need a study hall to be able to support them. Would we do that? Obviously for that student, if it makes sense for that student, then we're going to make that exception for that particular student. But again, it's like minimum standards and exceptions. That's what we're doing to benefit students. But again, that program of study and how this is outlaid is laying those core foundational values of what we believe it's important for all of our students and what they deserve to get from their high school education while they're with Penridge. And that I'll stand firm on. Mrs. Garish.
Thank you. So, celebrating excellence. I'm really excited that I get to speak about this slide. This is something that I'm super excited to have my incoming freshmen, the class of 2028, be able to have the opportunity to strive for. Throughout this presentation, we talked about minimum requirements, we talked about rigor, we talked about relevance, we talked about wanting to encourage people to go beyond the minimum. And we want to celebrate students who do that. And to do that, what we would like to do is to create a pathway where a student would get a special designation, a scholar's diploma, for going beyond the minimum. So if you take a look, we have this pathway designed for both the Penridge student and the student who is taking classes at Upper Bucks County Technical School. You'll see the required classes that they would be taking, the number of classes and the number of credits, and they would be going beyond that minimum of 28 and taking 30 credits. There also would be the requirement of a standard GPA, a weighted GPA of 3.4, participation in dual enrollment courses, so again, just challenging themselves going into more rigorous courses, whether those are AP or dual enrollment courses, or the rigor of being part of Upper Bucks County Technical School for 3 years and then earning an advanced score on the NACHI exam. So what this does is it incentivizes for students this idea of really valuing and taking part in their high school experience and taking part in ways that will help them achieve their next step, whatever that next step may be. So we're excited about this opportunity and we hope that it helps to incentivize, but also celebrate those students who go beyond the minimum.
This, maybe I'm misunderstanding. This is if, like, you're saying it would be this pathway as well as the previous slide. It's not it's, like, maybe I'm,
So
like, class of 2028 does not mean that we're shifting everyone to this model.
No.
This is like, if a student goes in and they want to
Correct.
choose this scholar pathway.
Exactly.
Right, okay. Okay.
So what if they choose this pathway, but they don't get a cumulative weighted GPA of 3?
That's right.
What if it's,
Then they wouldn't get the designation. It's really when we talk, it's funny, the pathway component, this is just an opportunity for students to set a goal to attain this.
Kind of like in college, if you get like you would get something.
It's
in
not
the
in place
graduation
of,
show.
it's not in place of the other honors designation that are already outlined. What this is to say, hey, you're going to get value out of trying to accomplish these, and you're going to get a recognition on your diploma.
that's what it is.
It's
It's
a
a
recognition,
recognition.
it's a special recognition.
But we wanted to make sure that both our tech students as well as our regular students had that same path.
In
College.
Ron just said college, you see that, and then that's
Absolutely.
weighted by that.
They are on track to earn that scholar's diploma when they're applying, because you wouldn't earn it until the end of your senior year. But when applying for colleges, you would be able to highlight that you're on track to be earning that scholar's diploma.
So as a freshman, do you then say, I want to be on this track?
You would be continuing to not just do the minimum number of classes. You would be taking your 8 classes as a freshman, you'd be taking your 8 credits as a sophomore, and then in your junior year, you wouldn't just take 6 credits.
Right.
You would take additional classes to help you get to that 30 credit requirement.
Which gives you a lot of electives then too.
Mhm. Right. Just remember that students have the ability with the new schedule to take up to 32 credits throughout the course of their 4 years. Our minimum requirement is 28, and we're celebrating those who go to 30 or beyond and also have academic success.
We have a question over here, actually.
Okay.
If you, just for the AP courses, maybe you discussed this, and I missed it when I reviewed this. Do students have to take the AP exam as long as they take the AP course?
We discussed
Yeah.
that, and the difference between the NOCTI and the AP exam is the NOCTI does not, to my knowledge, have a fee associated with it. If I'm wrong, please correct me, but the AP tests do. So we were back and forth on whether requiring the test would be something that we would want to include within our scholars diploma because of that language.
Okay, and for the NOCTI, we consider a proficient score, or do you have to get advanced? Was there any conversation?
We were proposing the advanced score, however,
Yeah,
there's a discussion on what makes
that
sense
was,
for our
that
students.
was actually our last conversation.
Okay.
Like that's where we landed on advanced because we're looking to highlight.
To try to,
What I would like to do is get more data to see what our actual numbers are as far as where our student bodies actually fall within those advanced proficient runs. We're below basic, right? That way we can make a better informed decision, but we didn't have that information.
I guess just what threw me off was that it's the minimum, the 3 AP or dual enrollment, but there's no, like, they could take 3 and fail all 3. But
So they
But
would
that,
not have
then they
to
wouldn't
do
have the
more.
cumulative GPA.
I guess, yeah, they would have the cumulative.
And the dual enrollment courses, as of next year, will be weighted from an AP standpoint. So that's why that's included in that.
And was there any consideration, and this is just me just asking this question, was there any consideration for world language for the upper bucks? For scholar, and the only reason I'm saying, like, even thinking about it, just asking in general, is just if students in mechatronics, they fall in love with mechatronics and want to go to college for engineering, and now they're in that.
But that's where that intentional planning would have to come in, because if they're fully invested in 4 years of tech,
Right.
their ability to actually take those world language, whether our social studies requirement was 4 or not, wouldn't be there, right? So it's a matter of how we are going to help work with an individual student to find their pathway, but that would fall into one of those categories that you can't have. Like maybe they could take some summer courses or some dual enrollment courses to find those languages. And that's that pathway that we would have to research and help that student get through.
And the other thing is that those world language classes could fall into the elective bucket for the Upper Bucks County students. I would hate to make it a requirement for all of the Upper Bucks County students because many of them are going on a path where that
Where
language
it's not
requirement's
required.
not going on. And so keeping it in the elective bucket provides them with more flexibility.
Gotcha.
So they could still do.
They still do, they're not excluded from those courses.
When we were going through, and you might agree with me or not, you got to the 11th grade year and then you're like, oh man, if I wanted to go to college, we're figuring out. The good news is we're thinking about this and working with the parents and the students and collectively as a school to help these individuals start planning as soon as they get here.
And the other thing that is the beauty of a block schedule with the semester base that we're doing, if the student figures that out first semester of their junior year, they have actually 3 more opportunities to take those introductory language classes, for example, whereas right now, if a student figures that out their junior year, and we're in November, December, they can't enroll in a class, their only option would be to take a level 1 class their senior year of a language. So just the block schedule itself allows students to course correct as they make their way through their high school career.
I like this too because I feel like it's a way to encourage students and to help parents encourage their students to not just leave school early because you've met your graduation requirements. I think it gives them like, here's another defined step that you can aim towards.
You said that, not me.
Strive for something more, right?
Yeah,
Strive for something more.
yeah, and it's kind of laid out there for you, you know, like, yo, you've committed to this, that's great.
Right.
So, I'm sorry.
And I was gonna say, if a student falls short, there's no harm in that.
Right.
It's something you're striving towards.
Right.
Which is, if you take a look at those minimum graduation requirements in combination with the required credits, the scholar's diploma pathway, within the context of how it's going to be outlined within our block scheduling, that's what we firmly believe is the best pathway for our students to accomplish whatever their post-secondary goals, whether that be moving on to a technical school, moving on to college or military or not. All right, whatever pathway that they have, we're going to provide them the maximum effort to get to that goal.
That's where I feel like, I wonder if we could even offer an additional pathway, like we have the scholar and then the one before, and having another one, like you brought up military, but just having more options to take some of those electives. Like we have some very cool electives that would go great with like the military pathway, but they might not be able to take that as much if they're required with that social studies. So I would love to see if there was an additional pathway that did not require that for social studies, where, and I know, like again, I'm going off random a little bit, but even like we used to require driver's ed, and now like if students take a driver's ed course, they can get a discount on insurance. Like just, you know, you see accidents happen, different things like that, sometimes of younger ones, and I think those are also good skills to have. But this would be a great time to kind of look at some things that we offer and other pathways and kind of, I would hate us to go in the wrong direction. I feel like we've like to just do the core extra social studies that possibly again might not fit the pathway. Maybe there could be other things that we could offer that, I don't know, like, and to what Mr. Palmer said of having like examples, I think that would be great too, like with parting with guidance and coming up with some templates so that it's very, like, I don't know, just to have multiple options. Like now would be the time to do that.
And when you look through the program of study, you'll see that for each pathway, there are suggestions of courses to take. And one of the differences of the pathway program that we've been developing, the career pathway program, and we're using pathway in different ways here, but right now I'm speaking about the career pathway. Mr. Dyer is helping to develop the college and career pathway program. When you look at our program of studies, it says, are you interested in a STEM career or a military career? Here are some of the courses that might be helpful. There's not a requirement right now for our students in the pathway program. You must to take this class, this class, this class, and this class, because life isn't a straight line. People change their direction as they learn more. So instead, being a part of the pathway experience, being a part of the visits for the corporations that come in, different people who come in from the outside community, going and doing site visits, doing a career mentor program, all of that is what earns them that credit, because that is an elective credit that students can take. I believe it's actually a half credit, if I remember correctly. So that guidance is being provided and encouraged, and that's part of the conversation that our guidance counselors have with our students when we talk about course selection. So while it's not something where it's saying you must take these particular courses, it's still being provided to students as a framework to have them, again, more intentionally plan their course of study for the 4 years.
Right. And I love that. I just think then if they would have more of those opportunities if they didn't have that required social studies, if they choose not to take that. But that's great they're having those conversations, and that's a 0.5 elective credit.
Well, that's what it's really for social studies for 4 years. It's 3.5 credits.
3.5.
So it really isn't a full 4.
Well, it's not 3.5 because that personal finance, you don't necessarily have to take it for social studies. You can take it with humanities. It's not just the social studies.
But you can. But you can.
But you can, exactly. So not necessarily all kids might not take and use it in place of social studies. They could use it, I think, for science as well as humanities. So it's still predominantly could be for social studies.
But it would be the decision of a student.
I was just about to say, that would be a student choice, how they would want to actually.
It comes back to what Bradley said earlier, and I agree with you that the social studies is not something we should just play around with and drop half a credit or full credit. And it's the essential part of the teaching about government, about being a citizen, about so many things. And I don't think we should shortchange anybody. So we have a lot of flexibility in what we've come up with. I think it's excellent, and we have the ability to make exceptions. So I still feel very strongly that 4 years of social studies is the right path for every kid who goes through.
It should be a family and student decision, though. If it's not required, that should be a family.
No, I agree with you, but I think the electives does help, because I agree it should be, but I think the electives is what I'm understanding really does help with that. It's really just being able to sit down, if you need to, with the guidance counselor and figure out what's the best for my child and then go for it. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
And I think that's what we want, so.
Thank you so much to the high school team. Thank you.
Thank
So much work
Thank you.
went into that. Thank you.
Oh, are we done with block scheduling?
I
have another question, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
What do we need, like, what needs to be done to do this? What are the resources, like, what kind of changes need to be made? Or do we just like?
This is
I'm
Flip this one.
going
Yeah,
to defer
2
to
years
Dr.
of work.
Shai for
Yeah.
On
Oh, I know
this.
there's been a lot of work in this, yes, for sure.
So we're prepared to move to block scheduling for next year. All the principals worked with the departments. There was lots of conversations. You have the program of studies. We believe that we have the structure and the professional development that will be ongoing to move to the block, and we're prepared to do it in the fall.
Okay.
So this is something that we would like to move towards now, because students will be selecting their courses very soon.
Right.
And we needed your approval to be able to move forward with that, because guidance counselors are going to be talking to the students.
Right.
And we need to do a lot of communicating at 8th grade. We need parent nights, we need to start communicating it all. So,
which
yes,
we're ready to move on.
we are ready.
You're even including the graduation requirements or just block scheduling?
No, this will be in the program of studies.
So both?
Everything that you saw tonight is in the program of studies. So after this, I know policy is coming to talk about graduation policy. So we have the 4-year plan in there, right? So that is what we are recommending. We are recommending that we move forward with the current program of studies that includes everything that you heard tonight.
Oh my gosh, that was way too, that was a big change. I feel like in a lot of the stuff didn't come public until a little bit later, so maybe.
So we've been talking about block scheduling.
Block scheduling, yes,
Everybody
but
has
not
been
the
all
30
over
and 28
that.
credits.
Well, the
That's a
credit
huge
change, we talked about a lot, because with the block scheduling, we knew we were having an increase in credit. So I know that the sticking point is the 4th credit of social studies 4 years
No,
from
even the
now.
28, I don't think that we really ever, I don't remember discussions that we were going to increase from 24.
We talked about the increase in 24, I
We did
remember
it.
Dr. Bolton talking
Yeah,
about 32.
we did not discuss that.
As a.
As
32
total
is
credits.
a max. And that really was always part of the conversation with block.
Yes,
No,
it is.
I don't
I
recall
got it.
ever having that conversation with
You were
increasing the
thinking
credits.
27 or 28, there was a
Mhm.
variation. of it.
Right.
Everybody knew that block scheduling increased the amount of credits we had, that was in the reports too.
I don't know if
From
they
the
were
visits
discussing it.
to,
We have spent a lot of time, and I really don't feel like it's rushed, because I guess I've been a part of the planning for 2 years. It's been public, and we've had all these great discussions, and we've talked about credits, and we're finally here.
I don't think we've talked about the credits enough. I mean, that's a huge, again, I can't, I feel like you look at students that aren't always academically, and then to throw that required piece on it, I feel like they would be better served if they're gonna be able to pick an elective, something that they're more gifted in, more of their pathway. That's a huge jump to go from 24 to 28.
you realize if they stayed at 24, you can graduate in 3 years. right?
Well,
Which
there's
is-
other electives you could there's other electives they
get
could
8
take for
credits
that
a year.
time. But,
You won't have a senior year.
You're getting a lot more opportunities, that's why there's more credits, it's a simple, it's not, we're not doing anything different than anybody else is doing in block scheduling, I would assume, right? I mean, everyone, Central
no.
Box's, what's Central Box's requirements?
I don't
They're
have that
not,
information right in
I looked
front of
theirs
me,
up.
but we've reviewed all
Yeah, I understand.
of
This
the
is-
Bucks
it's not
County
a
and local
surprise.
schools and what their program of studies are, and there's nothing in our
no,
program of
Abington
studies
Abington
that
is
is not
20,
in
is really low.
219 credits.
What's that?
219 credits.
Which comes to, I looked it up, Abington is very low, 219 credits, but you guys do at different points, and you guys are block scheduling.
With the block scheduling,
I
just
looked that up.
they are.
I think there's been
Excuse me?
Some in the teachers' administrations have been on board with this change.
I'm sorry,
The teachers and administrators, they have been on board with this change of block scheduling. They've been on board with doing it.
yes.
Yes, okay.
I know some of the
Wow.
teachers,
Yeah,
You could
not
say-
all
I
teachers.
think that they're
Right,
not
but to
all
see, like-
teachers, but administratively, absolutely.
And,
And teachers, I'm sure they've
We're
been
not-
part of the conversation, just to know.
We're
We're
not
not
They are.
debating block
Yes.
scheduling,
I
we agreed to go
understand
through
that.
with that last year, so.
I understand, but I'm just going, what you're saying, just to see how everyone is
They're
feeling
part of
about
the
it. That's
community.
all.
No,
Yes.
I wanted to discuss that.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
there's
the
not,
only.
their minimum is 4.
With our current schedule, a student could earn a maximum of
24.
48 credits
Abington
in
for
the
block
4
is
years, and we
24.
only require 24, which I think is around 86% of what we can offer. 28 out of 32 is close to that percentage. I think it's a slightly higher.
Yes.
It's a math guy.
Well,
Slightly-
the same.
Slightly high.
slightly
There are
higher,
other
I got it.
but not dramatically higher. I think it goes from 86 to 87.5 or something like that, if you do the math.
There are other schools that do block scheduling that require 24, and they aren't that high. Like Abington is one, Central Bucks is 27, which I know is one less than what we said.
Well, we're trying to increase our rigor too. right?
Increase what?
Rigor.
But you can, we use that, I feel like sometimes it's like just by increasing a credit, it increases rigor. But a lot of times the rigor is within like the course. So it's just because you don't have that extra credit doesn't mean that you're
That's true.
losing
But it
rigor.
helps. Usually not.
So it's not
I would-
just-
I would agree with that rigor comment, because we have that in here, that rigor is associated with what is actually being taught in the course. I know from my perspective, these projected plans are to establish what we value here at Penridge and what our expectation is for our students in our community here. And that is not to say we don't want to be flexible and work with those students, but if you're getting a Penridge education, here's what those minimum educational requirements are going to be. And we trust that our teachers and that our students and that the community is going to back us to that end. So it's almost like every time we want to lower credits or talk about minimum requirements, what we're not doing is we're not talking about all this awesome stuff that we are providing the students. Does that make, it's like, we want to keep going back, I call it regression to the mean, talking about what the least amount that we have to do for these students. But we're saying, wait a second, we got all of these opportunities to promote many different types of ideas, not worrying about the minimum requirements.
Encourage more.
Would you have preferred to see like the extra credits in electives? Like even if we bumped up the 3 more credits?
If we were gonna go that way, yes. But it's hard because I feel like then, you know, there's like work release, like there's just so many things.
Yeah.
There's
Exactly.
so,
Exactly.
there's
So at one
yeah.
point, what we have to do is say,
Right.
Here's what our minimum requirements are.
But you are right.
Graduation
School
requirements,
choice
right?
is
Yeah.
my,
Exactly.
like if they get to choose and they're not required, that would be my.
But then you
So
have
maybe-
abilities to make those choices through college and career pathways and other avenues. There isn't a perfect answer to
Right.
that question, but what we want to do is promote, hey, students that are coming here, here's our expectation.
Yeah, I agree. We can't have them being like, oh, I finished in 3
Right.
years.
Right.
See ya.
Well,
You know, like we
And
need
it's
a reason for
time.
them to stay. But I also think maybe some of these different scenarios you've mapped out will be helpful because maybe we
Right.
can see what it looks like to have the required 2 STEM for a child who is struggling in school, like isn't into STEM type things and like, but what are some of the options for that child, you know, like, because, yeah, we don't want them to fumble, we don't want them to
No.
just be frustrated, but I think those are what you're saying are the ones that you'd be working with the parents, you'd be working with the student, to try and figure out how can we make some adjustments for
Absolutely.
the student.
100%.
Yeah. I think that will help, when we can see like who isn't doing this to perfection, like what does it look like?
I mean, again, I would just love to have one more pathway. We have the 2, one more that kind of doesn't have required
Yeah.
core. I wish there were 3 options. That would be, and then families can decide like what's the best path. I know it can't be perfect, but I would love to see that.
So it has to keep the 28, but maybe we distribute it differently. But I don't think we can come down from 28.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going by the recommendation of the group that did all the work. So I imagine that you're pretty thorough about that and check these things out. I certainly don't have the information, but
And it sounds like
I'm sure
parents,
you find another.
it's not a
student come.
defined pathway, but there is an option to work with you guys. And
Yeah, and there's
Or-
a basic
or-
minimum we want
always.
our
Yeah,
kids to have.
yeah.
A basic minimum we want them to have. I think that's important. You can't have too much flexibility too.
No, I understand.
That's where the
That's
minimum
dangerous.
requirements come in.
I mean,
Well, I think
we're
that-
hitting on a big educational debate that's been a big educational debate for a long time. What is the point where we move from generalist to starting to specialize? Most evidence that has been collected over the past 20, 30, 40 years has shown that the later we wait to specialize, the better. Because the more general skills we are able to bring to the table, the more flexible we are able to be as employees, the more flexible we are able to be as people, the more flexible we are able to be as business owners, the more skills, the more marketable things we have, the better. And so the more we can create students where we are giving them the opportunities to learn those skills that will give them the flexibility in adulthood, the better off we are and the better off they will be for it. And sometimes that's going to feel restrictive because I know I've had many a student over the years who's science-minded who goes, I don't understand why I can't just take science classes. It's because you need those other things. You need to have other pathways that allow you to access science in new ways. So we need to be balancing that need to give them the general skills they're going to need.
Well, I think I agree just from my perspective, from just trades work, is that we get a lot of people come to apply for apprenticeship that can't meet a minimum standard for education. They're not reading a proficient enough level. They're not completing math at a certain level. And it's just the work field has diversified enough that they need to be educated across a vast spectrum. I mean, it's I think being able to establish that baseline is a good way to go, and then just providing them the abilities to have the electives to be able to enhance that, geared towards what their passion is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was long.
Thank you very much.
Too much to remember.
Kicking us out.
Nice to see you balanced. Word or treat.
Oh, it's okay, we still got one more left.
Can you share yours?
Yes, take a 5-minute break.
Ron, we take a 5 minutes?
Yeah, do you guys mind if we do a 5-minute break?
5-minute break.
Hey, Dave, take it to 5 minutes. I don't know if we should.
Much like
We're live.
We're live.
Alright.
Hello, welcome to the policy committee. I've been working, so we are doing public comments now, but we'll do it at the end. What we're gonna start with tonight is what we've developed as the policy update plan. And I know I've explained this in email, but now's our opportunity to walk through it as a committee together. The purpose of this plan, whoa, enter the matrix, is for us to talk through just some basic concepts we want for our policies, and for us to start having the conversations around what do each one of these things mean to us, and we can just keep clarifying it in this document. Like, what does safe for all students mean? And then, is there anything else we want to add to this list around kind of becomes almost like a checklist that we're going to measure each policy against as we go through. Some of them, this will be very easy. Other ones, this is going to be much more nuanced and difficult, but it's the conversations that we want to have amongst us. Also, the purpose of this document is to show the committee members as well as the community what policies are coming up. So what's on the docket for the next meeting, or kind of like plan for policy review. So what you're gonna see on here, what's in green with the date, which I guess should have read today because it was because maybe the meeting, are the documents that we're gonna talk through today. And the type of update that we've added, we either have PSBA or board initiated. The difference of the two being, like, these are things that have even either come out of like an update to PSBA policy, or another review of a policy that when we've compared it to the most recent version of PSBA, we just want to sync it up better. And then when you scroll down further, the ones that, obviously bathroom is the first one that we're going to talk about in the next policy meeting, that is called board initiated. So these aren't coming from PSBA, these are coming from myself, working with board leadership, our solicitor, and Jen around, like, what are the policies that we, Angela too, around what are the policies we're going to start addressing sooner than later. So this is a working document. We can edit it as we see fit. We can move forward with it like this and make adjustments as we go. But the purpose of it is to be transparent, to give like a high level view of the purpose behind the update. But if we scroll back up on the top, I'm kind of going to break this meeting up a little bit, where we're going to start with those definitions that we have at the top. And hear people's thoughts on them, where even if you want to talk through an example of like, well, what would we consider safe? And I think we heard that tonight when we heard the feedback from community members around things that are happening in the bathrooms. What do we call unsafe? Can we list these out as something specific versus, you know, uncomfortable versus, I don't know, another third option it would be, but we could probably think of one. But for our policy perspective, what are we measuring against for these things? Fair. Fair is a very subjective word. So what does it mean for us when it comes to policy implementation and development within our district? Clear, can it be implemented? So especially the policies like the board initiated ones that may start with some changes to facilities or changes to how we work. Are we ready for it? Does the staff feel like they're ready to handle it? Can it be enforced? Again, if we talk about the bathroom policy, vaping, you can tell someone's breaking the policy because you see them vaping. Like, that one is a little more straightforward. Some other nuances to things like the bathroom policy are more difficult to be for even staff to understand if the policy is being broken. And if we can't give them the tools to do that, then we need to readdress this policy and see how we need to either clarify further or make some modifications. The last one, does it make the district susceptible to litigation? So this is the one that when I'm prioritizing, that I'm talking with our solicitor around, what would you prioritize? What are the ones that we, against current litigation, current precedent, what do we need to address first? So safe for all students. You can all say you absolutely love my definition, or you can start asking some questions, which is actually my hope. And they're purposely vague. I don't feel like they're defined enough.
I go back to the can be enforced, and we struggle with enforcing some of our existing policies, so it would be, when we consider a policy, we'll obviously have to figure out what's the best way to do that, and then bring up the vaping and the drug use, and we have policies, people aren't following them, so how do we figure out the best way to enforce them? Separate conversation, but you can have the best policy in the world, but not everyone's gonna follow it.
Right.
We need to be able to keep people safe.
I agree.
Quiet. Maybe we should have started this.
It might be too late to do this. All right, so even if we talk about some of the examples that were given tonight in public comment, obviously, it's not, I would say some of the things that were not safe that were given when there's a student waiting in the bathroom for, like, purposely coming to that I can understand why that student really is not, they're not just scared, like, I do feel like that is unsafe for that student. You know, it's not just that they're uncomfortable or nervous, I feel like that sort of example is unsafe. When there's threat of physical violence, when, like, is that considered unsafe? Like, what are,
I think that's the easiest one.
right, so like the examples of students saying I would shoot someone who came in this class, you know, like that's definitely considered unsafe, right? What are other examples that people have? Like I have mental harm up there too, and that's meant to capture some of those things I'm talking about where they're scaring, purposely really scaring another student, and it's not.
To an extent,
right.
Yeah.
I think though, I think it would be hard, like I feel like this is gonna be a working doc.
Definitely.
Just because I feel like for me, like they can be enforced and the safe for all students, like that has to go together. And obviously I don't know, you know, like we're not always on ground zero, so I know that they've put a lot of great things in place to try in efforts to keep all students safe. But maybe there's parts where we can tighten up. I don't know. Again, I don't really know like the daily grind. I don't know if they have like a daily operations meeting and they kind of go over stuff like, hey, yesterday we were heavy with this and this and this. Today we're gonna do, like, I don't know if those types of things are placed. Could we tighten that up? Who's involved in that daily operations meeting? I know before like bathrooms were monitored with teachers, but they wouldn't go in, not that they weren't allowed to, but I think that was some of the guidance that was given. So I think there's a lot of things that maybe aren't clear, concise. I know some of the bathrooms that are single-user bathrooms are multi-user bathrooms, and there's not a lot on each floor, so I don't know if it'd be better for us to understand where everything is, which ones are legit single users, which ones are multi-user being used as single users. So I think those two go together, like can be enforced and the safe for all students, like those might be things that, you know, and I'm sure, like I'm just being here for a little bit, I'm sure you have plenty of ideas where like where you, I don't know, see areas of growth to try to make that.
Sure, and I think we need to consult the senior high administrative team as well, just because something may be stated in a public comment. I don't know if it's factual or not. I don't have any context, and I don't want us to, just because if we receive an email or someone says to a board member, I heard this happened, I'm not here denying it, nor do I want to come across as defensive. I just don't know the frequency and intensity of these events. The suggestion maybe is it lawful? Would that be simple? You know, is it compliant, congruent with the Pennsylvania school code and our policies? And I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
And I think, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I do think that does help when looking at all of these points and then adding that to be like, these are the things that we want to look at with our policies. I think it really does.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Any policies that are coming in, it's so great to be able to check all of these boxes. Like when you're looking at a policy, think about a situation. Okay, well, how does that, like if this situation happens, how does the policy affect that? Have we gone through all these pieces and said, okay, we've talked about this, we've talked about this. This also helps us to make sure that we're talking to all the stakeholders that are involved in our policies as well. Making sure that whoever it's going to affect, that we're having those conversations, bringing them back, we're talking to them as a team, and making sure we're not forgetting anything, when we go to put these policies in place.
Yeah, I feel like I need to explain this better then, because I agree with what you just said. Like, we do need to measure and to make sure it's enforceable and stuff, but as we're developing a policy, I'm wondering if the better way to do this is, if this is like our checklist and there's anything we want to add to it, and then by policy, almost define, because we're setting the expectations as the board, and then we're relying on Angelo and his team to figure out the details on how to enforce it, et cetera, and come back and be like, well, actually this component might not be safe, et cetera. But we would start with, when we start with the bathrooms, what are our expectations of a safe bathroom? Like that kind of conversation, that it's not gonna be the same definition for every policy then. So this will be what we start off talking about and saying like a safe bathroom looks like this. Safe for everyone looks like this. And that'll be one piece of it. And something that's fair. So like the components of, are we forcing certain kids to have to run down to the first floor between every class? Like those sort of elements, let's write them down. Like it needs to be easily accessible. It needs to be something that doesn't like highlight them and who they are in any way, that's what that means, fair. It has to be clear. Okay, so we're gonna just measure the policy against that. Is there any wording in here that we have questions on? Is there anything in here that we feel like we might have different interpretations of what this means? So I'm going to backtrack because I don't think it is going to be helpful to kind of do this in a general manner right now, because I do think it is going to be very specific to policy.
Well, and I was going to actually say is that even going to just the elementary, or not the middle school level, all three buildings are set up differently.
Yeah.
So it might be beneficial to go to the administrative team in those buildings with this checklist and be able to understand what their needs are for that building specific to say, this is what we need, this is how our layout is, this is how we're going to be able to approach this in an efficient manner to protect the students. So that way, the plan would be district-wide, but also allowing us the ability to kind of tailor it. So that way we know we're not just throwing one blanket policy to cover everything.
Right.
Because I mean, even in my son's situation with their bathroom being on the downstairs floor, there's times where he has told me he's felt uncomfortable, and then he has to go upstairs to a bathroom upstairs. So to be able to give all the students the opportunity to use the bathroom, and I hate to just continue to say bathroom because it's a hot button topic, but it's just one of those issues where it's I think it's prevalent for all children. If they feel that they're being bullied in a situation, they want to be able to approach or be able to use the bathroom. So to be able for him to go up and down versus a school that might not have multiple floors, it's going to change the dynamic for that policy. So I think being able to go to the administrative team for each of the schools and get their feedback is going to be a strong indicator of how these policies should be kind of crafted and developed.
So I love this because I feel like this conversation is already working. I'm going to take this matrix and I'm kind of flipping it now, where what this becomes along those lines of can it be implemented, can it be enforced? We as the committee are now going to be like, okay, who do we need to talk to about this? We need to talk to elementary school admin, we need to work with Angelo to get feedback. This is where we're all going to sit down and be like, who are these stakeholders? Is there any particular scenarios that we feel like need to be delineated, like one story versus two stories? So walk through what are the stakeholder input and get their feedback on implementation, enforcement, et cetera. And this is what we'll do it'll probably be mostly around the board initiated policies that a lot of these will come against, but we also need to do this for all of our policies too, honestly, like if we have one up before us for read, if we're seeing something that isn't clear, or we feel like needs solicitor input, we need to have that discussion too. And so I'm flipping the matrix then, where we're gonna do this on a policy by policy basis, and we'll start with the bathroom one the next meeting, but these are the things I want everyone thinking about. You can reach out to me before the next meeting, we can do it in the meeting, and then also if there's something on here that you feel like we're missing, like a gap where there's like, well, we also need to consider this, then we'll add it, you know, and we'll have these discussions for all of us to walk through and start getting more on the same page with these things and making sure we're getting admin feedback, et cetera. So,
No, I was gonna say, and I mean, he was speaking to Angela's point earlier with having that resource, the Title IX resource, to be able to go online. I think that's gonna be a big help to pull the information from the community, to be able to say, this is what we're seeing, this is what my child's seeing, you know, and they wanted to address it, but then it gives us like that broad picture to be able to say, this is what's happening in the schools. So that we were able to, again, tailor that policy for what's actually happening on the school, you know, school level. And, you know, I go back to that, you know, you're standing in, I'm sure you've heard the analogy for the standing in fire, and then you see that as a all-encompassing, everything looks big, but to be able to see it from above and see the whole picture, to be able to tackle that as a whole, you know, as a whole, is going to be able to establish policies in general that are, I think they're going to be suitable for everybody. Because I don't want anybody to feel as though they're being left out from the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody needs to feel that their voices are being heard.
Well, and that's the purpose. We're gonna take our time with these, walk through them. The first one will be the toughest, not just because it is bathrooms, it's a tough one in general, but also because we're gonna keep coming up with an idea. And instead of pushing it, we'll be like, right, let's get that idea. Like we've talked about things like you said, annotating parts of the policy where we're like, this is in here because of Title IX and because of this section in Title IX. Like just giving as much information as we can to people on how we got to where we are and the information we used and what we considered. And that'll evolve. Like if there's more questions around it and we feel like we need to expand further, then we'll expand further and walk through this. And hopefully it gets easier every time as we kind of figure out a good pattern to move forward. Some of the things we captured, I feel like it's been forever since we talked, so I'm sorry. We were all ready for the beginning of January, and now we're like, so some of the things we capture in the table below are those sort of comments like, I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about the bathrooms today, but that's where we meant to capture it. So if we start off now with these policies that we do have to review, and Jen will give us a background around why these are up for review, what's happening in the district, why they're in front of us today, and then after we're done going through those and we go through our questions and comments, we'll start talking about what we have coming up and how we're capturing like why this is on the docket, and we can walk through those too and see if there's any additional information you guys want. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Jen to start going through the policies that we're going to review.
Great, thank you. I hope, I'm so sorry, it looks so on there. Okay, so our first policy on the agenda for first read is policy 251. It's students experiencing homelessness, foster care, and other educational stability. So I'm going to give you the reason as to why we're updating it, and then I will walk you through the language just to see the difference, because there's a lot of red and green there, and I can explain it so it's a bit more clear. So there has been updated language that came out from PSD regarding policy 251 that we needed to update in our current policy that we have. Our current policy speaks specifically to homeless students. The updates for this policy includes further clarification regarding education instability. So you're going to hear those new wording throughout this policy, and we'll explain what that is. And requirements that need to be in place by the district to support these students that are experiencing educational instability. And then we're also this year undergoing our McKinney-Vento LRE monitoring. So that's our homelessness for students that are homeless.
our audit. So our audit is directed by PDE. It's done every 2 years. And as part of that audit, we also need to go through and look at our current policies that relate to the audit. It gives us a chance to go through it and make sure that we are up to where we need to be. So you'll see everything here is related to PSBA, but I'll explain kind of what it looks like and the differences that were put through. Okay. All right. So you will see on page 2, 3, and 4. You're going to see really get into the news is definitions. So you'll see the definitions that were put into the policy. Students experiencing educational instability. What does that include? Enrollment, additional costs, foster care, homeless children and youth. So you'll see all these are just definitions. So as you're going through the policy, this is what it's actually relating to. Homeless children and youth, school of origin, and unaccompanied youth. So that's just, again, it's very specifically outlined what this is within the policy. So all that was added. So then what you'll see.
Just because it, like, when it says the authority experience, and it says like experiencing homelessness, foster care, and other educational instability.
Yes.
But where I'm confused is, why would they not just say experiencing educational instability? Because under the definition it says homelessness, foster care. So like on the front page when it says purpose, right?
Yeah.
It says the board recognizes the challenges. Sorry,
I'm gonna look at my here. Yeah. So I'm gonna look at my paper copy.
Sorry.
Good. No, you're good.
So, like it starts off, the board recognizes the challenges encountered by students experiencing homelessness, foster care, and other educational instability.
Yep.
So where I came off, I'm like, okay, well, educational instability could be incredibly broad, right? But then, like you said, you go to the definitions and
Yep.
it says homelessness.
Yep.
And then it says, but it says the adjudication for
Yep.
dependency, delinquency. That's the only piece that's like, then below it says a student experiencing foster care.
Yep.
So where I'm confused is with,
This says it
yeah, it's like it says educational instability, but then under the definition of educational instability, it has homelessness. So that in my mind, I'm like, are they making it too broad to, of course you want to be able to include and have every student be able to come to Penridge that needs to be. I just get more so nervous that if it's not very clear of definition, does it mean that anyone from anywhere could, come into our district? Like how broad does that go?
Well, I mean, you mean so.
Like that, would that educational instability give us not as clear?
In the definition you're talking about, like.
So it's talking about a student experiencing educational instability has to be either homeless, right?
Right.
There needs to be an adjudication. Yeah, it has to meet one of those criteria. An adjudication of, and you'll see it listed there. And then it says a student experiencing foster care may also qualify as a student experiencing educational instability as defined above. We have some students that are in foster care that are doing just fine. Like they're in a placement that is not permanent, but they're in a good spot. They're not struggling. So I think that's why they put that down there. But you also might have some foster care students that they've moved around a couple of times, because then we get into like enrollment, because then we have to identify what's the school of origin for that kid, and it's going to be the where they were just last place, so they're not continuing to move around. So I think that's why they list it that way, because I would say if you're going to be experiencing educational instability, you have to know that you are home. Like that, homeless is typically what we're looking at.
Okay.
So I think that's why they listed it that way.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Great.
Like I do think it's pretty tight as far as I think your concern is just a kid coming into the district being like, my kid's educationally unstable.
Right.
No, because they have to have a point of contact. We have to actually register them as homeless. We have to register to the state. So it's very specific as far as how you get that delineation.
Okay.
It's not just someone coming in and saying, hi. Yeah, absolutely.
No, that's fair.
Yep.
And they're still within the district though, right? Like,
So student that is identified as so if student's living in the district and then ends up becoming homeless, they are not necessarily living in the district. So what this does though is this gives us the ability to say, we're still going to provide an education for you while you are homeless at the moment, because we don't want to interrupt your education. And part of this policy also talks about putting someone, this is new to the policy, having someone in charge of all of those students. So you have a point of contact. So this person is helping with housing. This person is keeping up with the family so they know what's going on. Because sometimes then we have the point where the student's homeless, but maybe we go out to visit and it's like, wow, your environment looks pretty stable. You're living in another district. Where does that, are you still homeless, or do you have a permanent residence at this point? And that's when we start to have those conversations about that, which we will do from time to time. So, okay, does that help?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so then what you'll see, Chester, were you gonna fix this? I don't like people. So you have it on your computers as well. So on page 2, 3, and 4 are the definitions. You'll see then on page 4, all of that red, that's what was taken out because of all of the definitions that we just put in. So it talks about the definition of homeless student, and really it just took all this information and page 2, 3, and 4 made it a bit more specific. So that's where that comes from. Then you'll see under delegation of responsibility, that's page 4, this is a new requirement added where a designated, which I was just talking about, a designated point of contact needs to be made for all students experiencing educational instability. So we have one of our school social workers, Alicia Landgraf, is that point person. So now we have to make sure that person is identified as someone to our families when they're experiencing this. So what this point of contact does, and I'm going to kind of summarize what's under these next, it's page 4 and 5, 4, 5, and 6. So what they'll do is they ensure outreach and coordination with our, children and youth agency if needed, local services, the prompt identification and transfer of records. So if we have a student that is homeless and maybe they're coming from another district, we're making sure we're getting their records quite quickly and we're getting them into school if we need to. It also makes sure that this person will alert the district staff should they have a 504 and IEP, so making sure we have those documents and we're working pretty quickly. They'll help with training to school staff on the educational needs of students experiencing educational instability, and they'll also work with local housing providers, things like that, to make sure that they have what they need. I will say, we currently have about 60 students across the district who are homeless. We've gone up to 80, and that was during the flood that we had, where we had a lot of people that were displaced, and the war in Ukraine. That's been a big, piece for us. So, and on average, families are homeless for about a year. I was just trying to get some of that information because it kind of puts this in context as well. And that, what's really hard is that just finding the housing is difficult, or it's harder and harder to find housing that is available to our families. Okay, so then if you will, so 4 and 5, like I said, talks about what this person does. On page 6, let me try again. On page 6, under guidelines, so you'll see what this talks about. This is just updated language to note that students shall be provided supports and services and should not be discriminated against based off their status of homeless, which, obviously we understand. This just talks about parents and guardians can ask for. When student is, experiencing educational instability, they may not have all of their records at the beginning. We're not going to not let them come in to be with us unless, because they don't have all their records right away. So we're really working with the families to the best of our ability to get their kids into school. Page 7, 8, and 9 of the policy speaks to enrollment. So let me go here. Let's see how this goes. This is easier now. Oh, this is much better. Oh, no, it's not. I'm looking at my screen and not there. Okay, I'll just keep moving if you guys can see it on your computers. So page 7, 8, and 9 talks about enrollment, and it replaces the language on page 9 and 10. So this really just talks about making sure that the district continues to enroll a homeless student in the student school of origin within the district, which is what I was talking about. Like, say they're homeless and maybe they move from one attending area to another attending area within the district. We're gonna keep that kiddo in the place that they have been just to continue to keep that stability for that student. Then the bottom of page 7 also talks about the timeline of enrollment, making sure we're moving as quickly as possible.
What was in there like before for the timeliness of enrollment? Like it looks like it's new where it says.
So the enrollment was on page, so this is all the information that if you go to page 9, that's what was taken out. So it really just adds more information. So it talks about a homeless student shall continue to be enrolled in his or her school of origin while he or she remains homeless or until the end of the academic year. So it is very similar information. I just feel like in green it just clarifies it a little bit more. It also kind of speaks to what this coordinator, this person's able to do as well to help support them. And then it also talks about, on page 8 is dispute resolution. So again, that was in page 9 and 10. But again, it's a smaller part. It just talks about if a dispute arises over school selection or enrollment, what does that look like? So what the new language talks about eligibility, enrollment, or school selection. If a parent is or a guardian is struggling with, where the student is placed, we have a meeting, we bring a coordinator, and we talk about that. What's in the best interest of the child. Just really talks about that there needs to be a process. We need to have people talking about, what's going to be in the best interest of the student. Okay. I know there's a lot back and forth, but it's similar, just adds some more, some additional information.
And this is documenting what we currently do anyway, too.
Yep.
So even when they were updating it,
the process that we follow
are what we're already doing.
Yeah.
But the green is all new language, and it just feels like there is such a lot of extra language that wasn't in the previous, right? Like the green is extra.
There's 2 pages alone just on this new person, all the different roles that they have to do. So that's new to the policy. They didn't have that before as far as that person. When it comes to the other areas of enrollment and just the education records, I feel like it's just, and I feel like since this has been looked at before, we have lots of different scenarios for kids that are homeless and lots of things that have come up. So I feel like this just makes it a little more clear as far as what we need to do. I've reviewed it with our social workers and our process, and it's nothing that we're not doing now. It's just good practice. Mm-hmm. It is. And that's, with the exception of having the point person. We've always had a point person, but now this is quite specific because we have to make sure that we're, when student is homeless, there's always been that process of, we're going to the state, but that is a whole audit in itself that we have to keep track of, so that is something that we always do.
And I guess, just being completely honest, like PSBA is the only entity right now that offers these kind of services to schools, to public schools.
As far as policy
right, for
updates.
policy related.
Yeah.
So there's not like another, organization that we could even get their opinion on something. Do you know what I mean? Like that is the only one. So when I see all this additional, like do they, and I know like you were great in answering my questions because they do the homelessness audit every couple of years. So it's something that's needed. But do they give any description as to why they're adding all this extra language? Do they say what their purpose of doing that?
I believe some of it's just due to school code. If school code is changing, then they have to be able to change these components, and that's typically where it comes from. So that's, and then we obviously will always review the PSBA language as well. If there was any language in here that we thought, well, that doesn't jive or fit, then we're going to want to bring it up and talk through it because it may not match our current process. But typically, it has to do with school code. If there was school law or there was cases that were out there when maybe it included a student that was homeless, maybe there was a type of decision that was made where maybe the student was discriminated against or maybe enrollment didn't happen fast enough. I find that that's why then these are put in, and this is much more specific so that we can make sure that doesn't happen moving forward.
Well, when was the last time we reviewed this policy?
This is, it's been a few years. So, at least 2, because the audit the last audit we had was back in it was right around COVID. So I'm sure, what that looked like as far as updating policy. So, page 10 just talks about transportation for students in foster care. you'll see that it is similar to when we get to the, like, similar to what we already have in here. How transportation works for us, for students that are homeless, it's pretty much just like saying that, you know, we have to provide for a student that's homeless their transportation. We have really good supports with other districts. We try to share that transportation. So if they're living in another school district, we'll say, hey, we'll bus one way if you can bus the other way, because it is required that they are provided the transportation.
Is there a limit on distance? I mean,
There's
with our
not.
school district.
There's not, no.
Okay.
No. But it's a good question, Ron, because at one point sometimes what'll happen, if we find that a student is on the bus for like 2 hours, then that's usually the school of origin might not be the best spot for that kid. So then we might look at some different placement for them. Yep. The last piece on the policy that, now this again is new information, is page 11, is course credit and graduation. This was not a part of the last policy. So this really just ensures that, you know, it includes strategies to ensure that students experiencing this educational instability graduate in a timely manner. So it just provides, you know, us the ability to, you know, really make sure that we're able to look at courses, they're able to, you know, we're being very, I guess, very creative, making sure that the fact that they're homeless is not getting in their way of graduating. And it just puts that importance of that discussion, you know, as a part of the policy as well. Okay, so that was the biggest one. That was the most. The other two are a lot easier.
A lot of leniency in the
Yeah.
waiving of credits.
There is, and again, it has to be a conversation. You know, we've never had a problem with that in the past, but I think there may have been at some place, which is typically that's why these show up in policy at some point. So making sure that we are working with those students.
I would feel better though on page 4 where it talks about, I feel like it's a little bit, I feel like by taking out that section where it talks about homeless students are defined as individuals lacking a fixed regular nighttime residence which include the following conditions, I would feel better. I feel like it's more specific with that in there on page 4 that was striked out in the red.
Yeah.
I feel like it's more vague with that, and I don't know where else they cover it. Like I was looking of where like more specifics. And I'm not saying that it should just end there because there could be other, you know, maybe some things that are missing from this, but I feel more comfortable with the specifics instead of the more vagueness as to, because you know it says once they're identified homeless and they need to be enrolled immediately.
Yep.
Which I understand.
Yep.
However, I just feel like there should be, taking that away is kind of more vague.
So the red that's on page 4.
Yes.
So most of that is on page 3.
Okay.
Under homeless children and youth. I know there's a lot. So children and youth who are, so A, sharing the housing of other persons, living in motels, living in emergency, abandoned in hospitals. So that's A, B, C, and D. So that's there. And then awaiting foster care placement, awaiting foster care placement. I'll have to look for that, so I don't see that. But children and youth who have a primary nighttime residence, that's here. Living in cars, parks, public spaces, that's here as well. I can compare them.
And also, sorry, just looking at that, number 4 says, migratory children who qualify as homeless because they are living in circumstances described above. What do you think the definition of the migratory children would be?
Who qualify as homeless because they are living in circumstances described above.
I feel like are these students who are coming here
like
Ukraine, from Ukraine
like,
because they've been displaced?
And are they citizens of, like, you know, would they, like, that's
not information we're not able to.
But that's where I feel like that would need to be defined.
I don't think we're allowed to deny them access based on their citizenship.
Correct. We're not even allowed to ask about it. Yeah.
Because, like, if someone's here in that sort of situation, I would imagine they're here on like things like temporary visas until they get their citizenship or whatever their process is. And so if they might not have actual citizenship, but it doesn't mean that we don't want to educate them and.
Because that's something that wasn't in the old policy.
The migratory.
Mm-hmm.
This-
That's something that's not even in the red.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
yes, yeah.
Well, no,
I
it's
think-
number 8 in the red, living as migratory children.
Oh,
just
okay.
And
Yeah.
locations described. I do think, like,
remember
just
this
quickly,
is-
but it's worth a read through again to see exactly what is different. Like, it just seems to me like a kind of reframing of the 10 bullet points into,
But typically we follow what the BBC, unless it's controversial, we follow what PSD, PSD.
Yeah.
PSD.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
within reason, sometimes we might look at a couple of things, but for the most part, it's coming from,
I'm sure there's a reason why we changed it too, if there may be stuff we're not
we'll
seeing.
compare
Well, and
it
you'll
now.
see-
We'll go through it like
Yeah, we can take
bullet point by
bullet.
bullet point and see which ones aren't exactly in the text again and
okay,
let you
yeah.
know.
And I will note too, anytime you see like a number in parentheses, like the 25, the 26, that's all related back to school code. So that's coming from the school code,
Okay.
just as a point as well, point of reference. Okay, so you would like me to provide some further clarification on just the breakdown of the red and where it can be found in the green? How about that?
No,
Just so
I mean, but that was good to see.
Yeah.
So no, I feel that the fact that it was in there beforehand, I guess that's what I'm just
Yeah.
trying to find, like, it
Yep.
just feels like so much, so I'm
It
trying
is
to
a
like
lot,
sift
yeah.
through, like,
It is a lot, yeah, and it really just clarifies a lot more. Yep,
But you did, right, just to add, you did add kind of some additional notes that she clarifies also what was put in, which I thought was really helpful.
yeah,
tried to
it's
do
super
so much
helpful.
Even though it is like, yeah,
Right,
I
but
know,
it's like
because
another
it is,
language.
yeah,
Sometimes.
yeah,
I mean,
it
for that
really
reason.
is.
It's
So I
a
felt
lot.
like that,
It is
because
a
then you
lot.
do look
And
at it and you're like, what is being added,
Right,
and you're like,
what's being
well,
taken
it's just-
away.
Right.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
more like,
no.
it seems like it's more definition of what you're saying, bringing in that extra person.
it is, yep, yep. And we will have a second read of it as well. If there's other
Right.
things that pop up, we can absolutely go through it. But in the meantime, I can provide a little bit more clarification on just the difference between the two.
Should we
Okay.
go ahead with that? Put it on
Maybe.
first read?
I think we could
That's
go
pending
first
question?
read, yeah. Okay, so then policy 202 is eligibility of non-resident students. So what this did was, it took a look at some of the other policies that relate to students that are homeless and wanted to make sure we were adding in that information regarding the educational instability component. So you'll see, I'll try to put it up here and see what happens. Yes, perfect. So you will see the bottom of page 2 talks about students experiencing educational instability. It's just adding that language in that talks about, district shall immediately admit a student experiencing homelessness, foster care, and other forms of educational instability, even if they don't have all the required documents when they start the registration process, in accordance with board policy, law, and regulation. So
This one doesn't change that
you will see as well, so that is on bottom page 2. The information in red on page 2 and page 3, this is all information that can now be found in policy 251, so that it was moved. The bottom, and that's from, no, not bottom of page 3. I want to talk about bottom of page 3. So bottom of page 3 talks about just other non-resident students. And this was per PS, this information was stricken out. What this talks about is that this was a recommendation from PSBA, but what this really talks about is guardianship paperwork. So this is in the, if we have a student that is a non-resident student may be admitted to the district schools without payment of tuition, where the child is not able to live with mom or dad, and the parent is taking guardianship over that over that child. Parent's incarcerated, so they might not be homeless, but they're going to be living with this other family. But what we have to do is we have to make sure that we get the proper paperwork to show that they're claiming guardianship. So it's paperwork that we do. It has to be notarized within the district. It's part of the registration process. So you'll see here that what they did, it says, before accepting such child as a student, the board may require the resident to file with the board secretary a sworn statement.
It's a little bit different. It all happens within our registration process. So, and what you'll see is the paragraph above it that talks about a non-resident student may be admitted to district school without payment of tuition. This does talk about what we do. We do get the guardianship from the parent through the documentation. What I think I might want to do here is I might just explain what guardianship looks like a little bit more within the document. We took out that red. It is very similar to what we do, but it's not to the board secretary. It's done within our registration process. It comes to me. I approve it. That it is notarized. So I think what I'd like to do is just clean this up so it's more specific to what Penridge does during that time. It's very similar, but some of the language looks a little bit different. So I think I may do that just so that I don't want to show we're taking it out because it is an important process, but maybe I'll make it more Penridge.
Do you think too that the educational instability, since this is a different policy, that definition should also be included in 202? Because that's what's added.
So the students, so I have the definition of students experiencing educational instability on the bottom of page 2 for 202.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what they wanted to add. They wanted to add that piece.
It's under guidance.
It's under
Sorry, I still don't see
guidelines,
it.
yeah. So we add that was the.
expanded definition, you mean?
But where do you see the definition of education?
I think what Jordan's referring to is like that
Oh,
bolded
like
out
the-
definition, like in the last policy.
Oh, yeah, if you'd like to, we could do that.
Right, just because it's new,
Yeah,
again,
that's
and
fine.
just, I feel like that definition should be put in there.
So you want to add the extended one from 251?
So people know they can reference it easier that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, just because if you're
That's
just looking
fine.
at that policy,
won't
if you're
know.
just looking at this policy and you're not looking at the other one, then it's
Yeah.
kind of like what?
Yeah, we
What
can
does that
absolutely
mean?
do that. Yeah, so I'll take that from 251, I'll add that in, and then I will make sure, on the bottom of page 3, the other non-resident students, I'm gonna just clean that up a little bit so it's more specific to what Penridge does, regarding a non-resident student. Okay, and
So
then.
then does that mean it comes back as first read again? Or is that like?
I mean, I think I could get you guys the changes by like tomorrow and you can
Okay.
look at it. I don't think it's that substantive, I can never say that word. Substantive maybe, there we go. That I do think we'd be okay, cause it's already in 251. Yeah, if you are all okay with that.
Yeah, I'll take a look. We'll let you know that's on.
And then the last one for the homelessness is just 204 was the other one that was talked about. All right, so this is attendance. So you'll see under purpose, really language was updated. I didn't really see a big difference between the two. It talks about the board recognizes that attendance is an important factor in educational success. Under authority, again, I didn't really see any differences in language. I think it just cleaned it up a little bit more. It does resort back to similar sections of the school code. Where there were more of a substantive change, I don't think a change, but just you'll see under definitions. So this policy was updated, I think, just maybe 2 years. I'm sorry, it was changed must have been 2020, the spring, well, no, that was COVID. At some point during the 1920 school year, because the compulsory school age changed. So you'll see in the policy from before what it did was it used to be age 8 until the age of 17. And then you'll see what I struck out at the beginning of the 2021 school year. It was going to be 6, you had to be in some type of schooling by 6 until age 18. So that was already in there. So I just took that all out and just kept it there. So I cleaned that up. So that was easy. And then you'll see here that they did under illness. I think they just talked here. So if a student is dismissed, it's including if a student is dismissed by designated staff during school hours for health-related reasons. So, a student comes to school, they go to the nurse. It's just noting that that's considered a excused absence as well if they leave during the school day. And then where we talk about the educational instability is this under here where it talks about
excuse lawful absences under 11. It has there other urgent reasons that may cause a student's absence related to homelessness, foster care, or other forms of educational instability. Really is just saying that, you know, if a student is going to be absent, maybe it has to do with the fact that the child was moving from one house to the other, or they were out for whatever reason because of, you know, what's going on in their family situation, that we would consider that an excused absence for that piece.
Can you just add that definition to this one as well?
Yeah,
Perfect. Thank
absolutely.
you.
Yeah. Okay, so those are the 3 policies for first read in regards to homelessness. The other one that we have up here is graduation requirements.
It was added.
So it was last week I sent an update when we changed it, was that I updated to add 217 as well to correspond with the high school's presentation of the graduation requirements. So you will see what was added was the information here about the minimum amount of credits. It also talks about the Scholars Diploma, which requires the student to obtain a minimum of 30 credits. So you'll see that chart, what was outlined, it's in a form there, so you can see it there. At the very end of the document, I'm just gonna go there for a second. It also has the graduation requirements, what was, this is from what we currently have, because this is for the class of 2024, so that stays there. And then you also have the new one, which is from the presentation today, which outlines your credits from 25 through 28.
I just still feel like we didn't discuss this in the past with increasing the, I know this is first read, so obviously it would go to another discussion, but I just feel like we've asked for some other documents to kind of see different examples, and I feel like we should definitely not be rushing on increasing the graduation requirements, especially to 28, and give, I don't know, the public, I guess, some time too. I don't know. I know it's not something I would be in support of right now. And then also just, how come it says, I know like the STEEL standard, that's more like the science, and that changed?
Yep.
So are those standards no longer called Common Core standards? Is that like STEEL separate now from the Common Core?
STEELS is the PA version really of NGSS.
Which is?
Next Generation Science Standards.
But so then basically it's just, there are 2 pockets. You have Common Core, which is like English and social studies and everything else, and then science will be its own entity.
We have to institute these separate STEELS standards by 2025.
Right.
I apologize, it's usually 2067.
The only question I have about this is, because I heard you say this is the first reading or not. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just pointing something out for Jen to.
Yeah, I know I need to put 2026 instead of
2067.
Instead of 2067. Yeah, I just wrote that down. Thanks.
Is that the program of studies is what we use for course selection. Course selection is going to occur within less than a month. So we need a decision at some point, and I'm not saying anybody needs to tell me that right now, but we will need to have a decision so that our students, as they come to select courses, and guidance counselors are guiding them, and parents are guiding them, that we know how many credits that they're going to acquire. And because we are moving into a block, right, that goes hand in hand.
So if we do first read and then we walk through some of the examples that we asked for to see like the real life applications of it, then maybe for second read is the time where we go through the examples here, and that's where we get to ask our questions around like, do some of these have to move? I don't think the 28 credits can move when we go to block scheduling. I feel like that's kind of a done deal. But what categories the requirements are in? Is that like where we are at right now? Like, I don't know, I know, what I mean is just
That's
more
where
like
I'm-
where your questions, you know,
No, we're also talking about next year and 4 years from now.
Right.
So, we need to straighten out for these kids starting out and, you know, over the next 3 years, but is there flexibility more in the future? Yes. Is there something, is a deadline? I don't quite understand why they can't start selecting their courses.
It's just you're planning as a freshman as a sophomore.
Understood.
In terms of how many credits you need, and these are different. So we would have to know that they're different in order to be able to help the kids select the courses.
Once you change it, you're locked into, training.
So for freshmen, I feel like those classes would not necessarily,
Maybe going.
they would not be changed as much.
The freshman would be
They're the ones
28
who
credits.
change the score mostly.
Yeah.
It's,
But what they would be signing up for their freshman year.
it's just the number of credits, because it's a block and it's different. It's
So
not what you're
it'd
doing
be-
right now.
It'd be 8 instead of,
Correct.
Yeah.
It would be 8, and we would need to know, yes, that it's a block, and that's what we're going.
but that's a full schedule, right? So we're not, although the credits are changing, it's not,
Full schedule for 9th and 10th grade.
we're getting a little
yeah.
more education now, but we're not putting more time in, so we have to change the credits.
Right. I feel like it's more where the credits, how they're distributed, seems to be more what the question is, right?
Right.
As we get into that kind of last column there, by 2028, how many social studies, et cetera, seems to be more what your concerns are, not so
Right.
much the 28 credits.
If it opens up, I mean, I do know there are some schools that have block and they still have 24. So I still feel like it's, I don't know, it's hard to require more than what technically sometimes they might not need, where they might, again, do other pathways. I hate requiring, I guess, I don't know, the courses that they're gonna take, but you're right. If it's coming down or compromise something, I'd rather have like an additional pathway to show like they, if it doesn't suit to go down that pathway, they don't have another option.
Right, because I thought like the thing that I'm stuck on is if we don't do 28, that whole idea that they could be done by the time they're juniors, we don't want it to happen.
Less than
Yeah. So I feel like if we, because obviously this will coincide with what we're talking about with the curriculum and stuff anyway, that what you guys need to move forward is to know that we're cool with the 28, right? That yeah, the incremental increase and that it's 8866, et cetera. And then
So you don't need to know if it's 4 social studies or 3.
Doesn't affect them yet, that's
Yeah.
4 years from now.
So that has
That's what we
some,
work on.
that has some
but
flexibility.
it's in there though, but it's in there as the attachment.
But we have to approve it the way
Right.
it is. So
Right.
if we want to change it, then we would go back to the second, the first,
But-
that would mess up there.
Right.
Normally, it's 3 months, we should have started this a long time ago,
I know.
obviously. But that's a lot of leadership change and a lot of other things going on.
Yeah, so I don't think we want to slow up block scheduling for any reason. And so I think that to me is the more critical component of this right now, what you guys need approved in order to move forward with that. But I do feel like we have time to go through the examples that we've asked for. And honestly, I mean, we can even see how it works next year and then decide, do we want to change the distribution of those credits? Like, because I don't think it's going to impact students until 2028.
Well, 2025 was one of the years that was changed up there.
Yeah,
There was
one.
something
But that,
for
it's a,
2025.
yeah, it's a credit added every year, but the 4 social studies, like the one you're talking about at the end and the tech school line 2, that all isn't in place till 2028.
So what we could,
2025's increase was a 0.5.
Okay, 0.5, thank you.
so what we could do is that, so the charts that are at the bottom of this, that are attached, we can take those off, right? Because these are where we're trying to figure out, like, how things are gonna be distributed. But we still continue to keep the chart within the policy that talks about the 24 through the 28. It's kind of like a compromise. We know we need these credits, but how in which they get there is something that we can talk a little bit more about, so it doesn't slow you down,
Right.
but it also
Yeah,
gives
does
us
that
some
work?
time to talk.
Is that okay?
That would be wonderful.
Okay.
Yes, we would
Are you okay
appreciate
with
that,
that?
and certainly will provide all of you with whatever information you need regarding the chart and make any
I
adjustments.
mean, you guys do, you guys are, but I feel like I need to do some research on my own just to see what other districts do block and don't have so many credits and how that shakes out. If it's the 3 years, then you're right, you're right, that my biggest thing is how the credits are allotted and distributed, 100%. But I still feel like I have to just do a little bit of my own.
Sure.
But like, it seems like the rest of you are in consensus, and I appreciate you guys asking, but.
Well, and I feel like it'll help too if, per Jen's suggestion, we take, because all of that schedule you're talking about with how they're distributed in each subject are attached there. So we're gonna take that off, that isn't part of like
Right.
the formal
But the
policy
28
review.
is what.
But then this part will stay though,
Then they can move
yes.
forward with that.
That's
just a matter
on
of
first read.
distribution, right?
It's still
Yeah.
first read.
Right.
Still not-
Right,
not
still
for
first
3
read,
months.
right.
Yeah.
So,
But then it still has that, the 28, so yeah.
so that would mean we could move forward with the block with that, with
Yeah.
those numbers.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
My laptop died, so I'm like,
No, mine too.
So we have,
We will have
potential
power
for
strips
public
set up
comment?
next time.
Okay, I did
No,
want to
no,
real
that's
quickly
not
though,
this week.
could you pull up the plan again, just so we can talk about what's coming?
Well, I like that.
So there are a few more policies that are part of the homelessness audit that, Jen and I just wanted to tie up some loose ends before those came up. So, those will be at the next meeting, and we kind of, what we're trying to do is just give an explanation of what's happening here. There was some transportation requirements to that, so we just want to follow up with transportation, make sure they're okay with it. So that what we're bringing forward, we know has been vetted with all the appropriate people. There was a change in here that we did want to talk to the special education solicitor for the enrollment of students, that we don't think will be a problem, but again, just want to make sure.
Just because we're going to age 22 now for
Yeah.
students, that's just that language change.
Right.
So we'll need that.
The dress and grooming, we just wanted to look at this compared to the wording that's in our student handbooks. That was just kind of a final knot we wanted to tie. And then the last one, what's in here in bathroom, please take a look at this. These are the things that we're listing of what we want to consider. Reach out to me if there's things you want to add, things you want us to be considering for this first read. And I'll reiterate again, the first read is, it's not gonna pass for first read until we feel like we've had the discussions we need. And so, let me know if there's other information you'd like me to have. We're obviously getting comments from the community around this too that we're considering. And then that way, what Jen and I can come with at the first meeting, which actually, oh my God, we gotta get lots of one time. But kind of walk through what we used to do the first draft, the feedback that we incorporated, feedback if we didn't incorporate it, why we didn't incorporate it, and we're really trying to work hard to be transparent with the information we're getting, how we're using it, and who we've talked to along the way. And obviously, you guys are number one on the list of people that we need to talk to. So please provide any feedback. So that is that. So now we're going to public comment, but I can't read policy 903. Did we reread it?
It's over here.
Leah. Okay.
That was.
So for Lee, who's waited so patiently, are you ready? Lee, according to policy 903, public comment, which is limited to 3 minutes, you need to, okay,
Good evening, Lee Rush, Percy Borough. I actually forgot what I was going to say.
We mold you.
Bad joke. I came tonight, as I have many times in my life, to a meeting to acknowledge my role as a stakeholder. I was so glad to read this document. So when you wrote that as a district, as we develop our policies, we'll work with administration. And I don't know if I'm a key stakeholder, but I have a stake in Penridge, having lived here and graduated. And I don't recall that if there was ever a time that there's more new energy and new people in a board meeting, including senior administration, from the superintendent to assistant superintendents, to our new high school principal, to new board members, so, and I think that has a lot of gifts, a lot of fresh eyes, what I call fresh eyes. I think I already told this board member, it's such a refreshing thing to be greeted at a door. The hospitality that extends to people is priceless. Thank you. So what I wanted to talk just a little bit about tonight, and I didn't bring my timer over, so I'll probably get cut off because I didn't see how much time I already spoke. But I wanted to talk about this one item that you wrote here, that can our policies be enforced? How do we know they're being followed? So I wanted to talk a little bit about the public comment matter. And I have no problem. I mean, I'm a little bit past my bedtime, but I have no problem sitting and listening and learning. So personally, I'm fine with stacking the committee meetings. I understand they're very efficient instead of spreading it out over, multiple nights. It would help to know as a community member which committee might go first. So maybe schedule that, like this will go first, and then this one, maybe not with times. It would help people know when they might want to come into the room to make a comment. And then there's another one on here that's always kind of been a bug to me. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. I guess you're presiding, this is your chair. No participant may address or question any board member individually. So I really liked what Mr. Merkel said earlier about the Republic. And one right I've always been felt a pretty big privilege to have the right to speak. My mother didn't like that one so much when I was a teenager. I always tried to establish my right to have my voice. So I think that that you might want to take a look at that as you refine some of these policies. To allow people to come up to this podium and take their 3 minutes and say what they want to say within reason, civil. To make a question, to address somebody, thank them. I mean, technically, I could technically welcome Mr. Palmer here and say, thank you for coming to Penn Ridge. I'm supposed to direct everything to you. So loosen it up a little bit. And it's still within, bounds of being civil and, all these other things, not being obscene, not threatening violence, and threatening bodily harm. I don't think that's a problem. The other one here about the people who speak must be a resident of this district. There's probably enough case law to say that since that I pay federal and state tax, I technically could speak at any public school in America. So just a little tweak there might be helpful. And the last comment I have is about policy number 003. So this one, not many people referred to a lot, but I guess it got referred to last year when there was some debate about suspending a policy to not have a second read. I think there's some language in here about a majority of the board could vote to suspend a rule and as an operation of a board policy or procedure. And reading further, it says here that the board procedures must be adopted, appealed, or amended by a 2/3 vote of the board, which would be 6 people. And interesting enough, Penn Ridge differentiates a board policy, says it must be repealed, amended, or adopted by a majority, which is 5. So that's really unusual that this district has that distinction made between a board policy and a board procedure. My own suggestion would be to really seriously discuss making it a 2/3 vote or supermajority to change the school policy. And the reason I say that is just because we are in a kind of challenging time regarding, who's in, who's out, who's up, who's down, who's the winner, who's the loser. I don't like speaking in that language because I feel that at the end of the day, we either all win or lose. So I'm done with time. That's a very polite way to put it to watch. It really is the first. But anyway, just think about making that possible then that you have voices of dissent and reason and questions and not to let anything come just because of majority vote, especially with the times we're living in. Thank you very much. Have an interesting night. Thank you.
Thank you. This ends the policy committee meeting.